screen starts glowing and the film starts rolling. You wanna be knowing what you might be in for. So give the show a listen and find out what you're missing. Put yourself in position for the easy good score.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Goods, a film podcast. You with me, Dan?
I'm here. And normally I like to open by saying welcome to the blank episode of the Goods of Film podcast, but I'll let you introduce this historic milestone.
Thank you, because this is a big blank. This is our semi-quincentenisode.
Woohoo!
That means 250. The 250th time that we've sat down here to record one of our film podcast episodes. So that's like, what, 6 years-ish? Almost. I guess there's 50 weeks in a year, so 6 years would be like 300-ish weeks. But it's not too far off. It's a lot of weeks and a lot of years that we've been doing this. So, Dan, 250. That feels like a milestone. It's half of 500. It's a quarter of 1,000.
Yeah. Not too many things that you count how many of those things you do make it to 250. So it's a big number. And yeah, the fact that it's a quarter of 1,000, I think that's big. This is probably the only time that we will ever have a episode anniversary that matches our United States anniversary. 250 and 250, because this is 2026, of course.
That's right. Also the semi-quincentennial of the United States of America.
Assuming you go by the Declaration of Independence, which pretty much everybody does.
Yes. Yeah, good point. It's not quite that many years if you go by the ratification of the Constitution, which is, we've only had presidents as long as we've had the Constitution. Before that, there were some, administrators of the Articles of Confederation for like 10 years.
And there was a Revolutionary War before that, even.
That's true, one that went on for 8 years. So it's complicated, but it is interesting, I think, that we've had ostensibly one continuous government in the country. Whereas, the French Revolution happened after the American Revolution, and they've had like 5 governments since then. So it feels like a milestone. Maybe we'll come back to that when July comes along. But yeah, it feels potent. 250 episodes, 250 years of the nation. The stars are aligning. And so, this is an episode special. All of our episodes are special, but this is one that has been in the works for a while because I wanted to finally devote an episode to a couple films that I feel like we've name-dropped frequently on the podcast in these 5+ years, but have not yet received episodes. We gradually, each week, we check off a movie or two that we've been waiting to get around to, but these ones feel like they are overdue. And so the films in question, I've put together in an odd double feature called Armadeus. Armadeus, Dan. It's Armageddon from 1998 and Best Picture winner Amadeus from 1984. Did you get a chance to watch both of these this week?
I did. I watched both of them this past week. We can talk about our experiences with each of them as we kind of lead into it. But I had more experience with Amadeus than with Armageddon. But I actually remembered a funny anecdote that I did see Armageddon before. I saw it like when it was in theaters, I think, or maybe right after it came out on home video and at a friend's sleepover. But I remember me and my friends talking about it at a sleepover shortly after it came out, like around when I was in 5th or 6th grade. And for some reason, that like outing has stuck in my mind. There was like some funny coming of age stuff. Like we were debating how much we actually curse. It's like, that's a thing like you don't do when you're a kid. and then you become a teen, and then you curse. And like we at that sleepover, not only did we watch Armageddon, but we talked about how much is it appropriate for kids to curse.
We can live like kings. Damn hell ass kings. Dan, something I want to talk about during this episode is whether this pairing felt like it made any sense at all. Was it just total whiplash? Is it just nonsense that I've done this? I was thinking about in the song Werewolf Bar Mitzvah, I think it's Donald Glover says that the premise is sweaty.
Sweaty. What does that mean to you?
It doesn't hang together. It wasn't a substantial reason to bring these elements together. And I want to know if you felt that. But I guess my thought is they've both been clamoring for an episode for a while. I feel like a big number like 250 can't just be one movie. It's got to be more of a blockbuster. And I do feel like both of these films, they're epics, blockbusters of a sort, and perhaps they represent a style of filmmaking at the peak of its power.
You really had to stretch to get that there. I'm not feeling the connective tissue on these, but that's all right. We can maybe dive in further as we go.
Gotta ask ChatGPT, how is Armageddon like Amadeus? So my past experience with Armageddon was, I think I rented it. So I was only 8 when it came out, but I definitely remember it getting the big like marketing push that it was getting all the trailers on TV and like tie-ins at various places, and you heard the song. And it actually ended up being the highest grossing film of 1998. Also, Dan, only one of these films is in the Criterion Collection.
Ah, okay.
Guess which one?
I mean, I know.
We've talked about it on the podcast before. It's Armageddon. Armageddon has a Criterion release, a Criterion spine number. But okay, what exactly is the Criterion Collection though, Dan? Because that to me is odd.
Do we want to dive into this now, Brian?
Well, either now or I guess in between, but I feel like, yeah,
Okay.
it's all part and parcel.
So this is a thing that often comes up when you talk about the Criterion Collection is skeptics, trolls, whomever will say, Armageddon's in the Criterion Collection. So what does that mean? And various spins on that. And Brian has been such a troll. He doesn't say it in quite so nasally a voice as I just said it, but some variation of that. Okay, so let's talk about this. So just to kind of point out the obvious point here, Armageddon is in some ways the epitome of a spectacle of
it's the stupid blockbuster.
Right. It's the theater trash from the 90s, studio filmmaking. And in particular, it is a Michael Bay production. Michael Bay is known for a filmmaking style I've heard called Bayhem, which is lots and lots of explosions and noise and sleek surfaces and just nonstop action. Okay, and then Amadeus is not exactly an art picture, but it's definitely it's a Best Picture winner. It's a high production value epic, but it's one that is adapted from a play, and it talks a lot about like God, and it plays opera and classical music, and it got a lot of awards attention and has often gone on to very strong appraisals over time. So it's, as opposed to Armageddon, which received a critical drubbing, and I would say broadly is considered not a very good movie by the intelligentsia. Okay, so what does that have to do with the Criterion Collection? Criterion Collection is a independent publishing label that was started, I think, in like the early 90s or something like that. And their big thing is that they have successfully branded themselves as being a sort of a couple things. So one is they are good curators of cinema. In other words, the movies they pick tend to be good movies or interesting movies. Not just that, but like more often than not have a art house element to them. So like these are the types of movies you watch in film school. And then not just that, but they do a very excellent job with their production primarily of physical media. So they do like a lot of special features and they get the best transfers. And they often, especially in recent years as their fame has gone up, get involvement with the original filmmakers. And they get audio commentary tracks and all sorts of stuff. They get really nice essays written and for liner booklets. To some extent, Criterion Collection has become synonymous with being like a cinephile geek and also being like a physical media hound. Like, Criterion is going to be both a good movie and a good, well-made production. And their big breakout came in Laserdiscs. So they were one of the pioneers of putting out Laserdisc movies and like again having like special touches on them and good transfers and audio commentaries and stuff that actually was kind of the first time you could really do it on Laserdisc.
How many laser discs do you have, Dan?
I own 0 Laserdiscs. I have watched Laserdiscs before. My college library had Laserdiscs. And one time I was like, I'm just going to watch a Laserdisc. And then you could also reserve a room to watch them where they had like the player. So I have seen a film on Laserdisc before, but it looks like in size, it's like a vinyl, like a 33 and a third vinyl record, but it's essentially a DVD. And I think the technology needed one more iteration before it really got both cheap enough to produce and convenient enough to store to be mainstream. And that ended up being the DVD, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a few reasons is the storage is not very compact on the Laserdisc. Not only is it big, it's like the video has to be on both sides of the disc, and you're flipping discs every 15 minutes. So it didn't really work. It was not as convenient as VHS, but it allowed you to have the special features like a more compact DVD. All that to say, I have about 80 Laserdiscs currently.
Oh, that's awesome. Another thing that Criterion does is number their releases. Now, there are a lot of asterisks on this, like on how they number. They don't number every single release, and they have been a little inconsistent over time about if they do a box set of like 3 movies, does each one of those get a number, or does the entire box set get a number? But in general, every movie they release that gets a new spine number. I haven't checked in a while, but they're well over 1,000. Armageddon was something like number, I think it had a 4 and an 8. It was either 84 or 48. I think it was 48, which is also pretty early.
Oh, so actually I wrote it down. It is spine number 40.
40, okay. So there you go. Spine number 40 for Armageddon. So I have a lot of thoughts about this. And Brian, I just told you what, in my viewpoint, a Criterion movie is. Why do you feel that it's noteworthy that Armageddon has, or maybe contradictory, that Armageddon has a Criterion release?
So the way I feel about Criterion is kind of like when the Library of Congress will do its, I don't know if it's every year, but they induct classes of films that are considered culturally significant, and they will like preserve them in the archives. So go back to the source and like get the original highest quality that can be gotten and say this belongs in the Library of Congress as part of the timeless record of film. That's what Criterion feels like to me. And I want to discuss, does Armageddon feel like it is culturally significant?
Well, okay, but you've already...
Perhaps. I'm on the fence. I'm not ready to rule it out. And we'll see where we land when we say, is it good?
I have more thoughts on this. Can I talk a little further about this?
Please.
All right. So you just said you view it the same as the Library of Congress, or at least similar to the Library of Congress, which it does indeed select, I think you said 10 movies a year, something like that, to preserve. But a couple things. They are not a government authority or a critical authority. They're a distribution company that needs to sell Blu-rays and DVDs and 4Ks and Laserdiscs. So the way they do that is they kind of preserve this brand integrity of, hey, we pick good movies and we do a good job releasing them, but still their goal is to sell movies. So at some point, they decided that they wanted to include this movie and that it was not that it would sell without damaging their future sales because they included a Michael Bay movie. And so I think we shouldn't hold them to the same standards that we do like true halls of fame, because again, they're trying to sell stuff. That's their goal. It's not like the Library of Congress where their mission is to preserve culture, you know?
Sure, but it is by design exclusive. It's like a gatekeeping agency. The name of the brand is Criterion. What is the Criterion, Dan? Like, what is the criterion that needs to be met to enter the Criterion Collection?
It's just a name that makes it sound prestigious, I guess. There's not really a singular criterion, but I have a few things to kind of support this, or to kind of expand upon whether or not you think Armageddon might be worthy of inclusion. So here I have a quote from the liner that they include with the DVD when you buy it from Criterion. It's written by Janine Basinger, who's a film critic and film historian. And we've actually talked about her before because I read her book and quoted it when we talked about early musicals when we had Hunter Allen on the show. But anyways, here's what she said in the DVD liner for Armageddon. Despite what you may have heard, Armageddon is a work of art by a cutting-edge artist who is a master of movement, light, color, and shape, and also of chaos, razzle-dazzle, and explosion. Although it qualifies as science fiction disaster movie, I see it as an epic form of the old Warner Brothers movies about working class men who have to step up and rescue a situation through their courage, true grit, and knowledge of machines. Productions such as Raoul Walsh's Manpower from 1941 and Alfred E. Green's Flowing Gold from 1940. The science fiction or disaster movie elements of Armageddon fit into the epic form, a form that exists to make movie stories we already know grander, larger, and more real in historic setting. All right. And then Variety. So Variety is a film magazine, and they also have a website. And so I found this article on Variety. The title of the article is Michael Bay, Seriously by David S. Cohen. One thing that I just want to say as a caveat to discussions about Michael Bay is for a while he was known as the Transformers guy. So he was the R-rated action movie guy. Then he made Armageddon, which is PG-13. And then before long, he was making Transformers movies. I don't know if there was something in between Armageddon and Transformer. Then he kind of got into the realm of very CG forward and also IP. So I think that reframed, that's when people got really sour on him, was around Transformers.
Yeah, he did the Ninja Turtles movie where they have lips.
Right. But anyways, so I think this was coming out around the time that Transformers was winding down and people were starting to wonder, what the hell is a Michael Bay movie? What does that mean? So this is from an article by David S. Cohen, and here's what he says. Variety senior film critic Peter DeBruge calls Bay a singular voice and notes that of a generation of filmmakers who came out of commercials and music videos, he is the one that has risen to the top of the pack and really continued to pioneer that aesthetic on the big screen for better and for worse. And then he interviewed another film critic, Scott Foundas, who is the contributing editor for the, quote, highbrow film comment magazine. He's an auteur through and through. You know within a few seconds of watching his movie that it's a Michael Bay movie, and beyond that, there's no question that he's influenced the visual language of the contemporary Hollywood blockbuster in a major way. Foundas puts Bay in line with a tradition of grand, if not always great, Hollywood filmmaking. Quote, he is, in a way, the inheritor of the tradition of a William Wyler and a Cecil B. DeMille, he says. You don't have biblical epics and sword and sandal movies anymore, so in a way, the superhero movies and the comic book movies are the modern-day equivalent to that. All right, one last thing that I want to share. By the way, I found a whole bunch of articles discussing Bay and Armageddon and their worth. So there's a blog. It's just called the Criterion Collection blog. And at this point, it's a little bit old. It's written by a film critic named Matthew Dessem, Dessem. What he was doing was he was watching every Criterion movie in spine number order in the pre-letterbox days. Now there's like watch challenges like this all the time.
And how many spine numbers are there? How many
Oh man.
Criterion inductees have there been? I feel like I checked and like at a certain point they may have even stopped doing spine numbers. I don't know. The total list was it like 1,200 or something? It's quite a few. 1,839.
Okay, so they're at 1,000. Wow, 1,839. And so this article, or this blog rather, did eventually get to Armageddon.
I mean, if it's going in spine order, it wouldn't take too long.
I mean, 40 movies is still a decent amount of movies. So he made it through 40 movies at least. That's true.
Well, Dan, we've made it through 40 movies and on and beyond.
Good point. It's a pretty thoughtful article. It's also a little fanboyish because he's like a big space guy apparently. So he's kind of speaking about his personal connection to the material. So it's worth reading. And I will link to this and then several other considerations of Armageddon's worth for the Criterion Closet and Bay as a figure worth studying. So here's what he says. Armageddon seems like an odd choice for a Criterion edition, but if the collection is intended to provide a representative sample of film throughout history, neglecting the late 90s studio system would be silly. There's another reason Armageddon specifically belongs in a collection like this one. Thanks to Top Gun, Jerry Bruckheimer was able to get the crew unbelievable access to the NASA facilities during the filming of this movie. So there are shots and sequences that are completely unprecedented and sheer techno-pornography for someone who, like me, grew up in love with the space program. Okay, but you might be wondering, what was Criterion actually thinking? These are all people who are elucidating why would we include Armageddon in a collection like this. But
there were actual humans involved in making this decision. So
exactly.
Where did they land?
So Lena Dunham, who is a controversial comedian, filmmaker, TV show runner, and actress, she has a movie in the Criterion Collection called Tiny Furniture. And she quoted in an interview what they said to her. The Criterion Collection was really clear with me. They definitely said this, by the way, her movie Tiny Furniture is essentially a mumblecore movie. Another thing that seems kind of antithetical to Criterion inclusion.
And also something we bring up all the time on the podcast.
They definitely said this wouldn't be a very orthodox choice for our label, but also this is really what Criterion is about. Unexpected choices. And it's a label that can release the best of the French New Wave, and it can release The Rock, which is a Michael Bay movie they put out, I believe, a little before they put out Armageddon. But you can plug in Armageddon for where he says The Rock. She says The Rock. They're interested in the ways that different kinds of films can be valued and inform the current cinematic dialogue. They were clear that this isn't a clear choice for them, but there is something in my film that reflects what's happening in digital filmmaking, and it's something they wanted to be a part of. So this idea that Criterion is intentionally including things that are not in their normal art house fare because it informs the way that we talk about and think about movies nowadays. So I don't know. There's also like a lot of other movies in Criterion that are not strictly film history fodder. Like a Kevin Smith comedy's in there, Chasing Amy. You have The Princess Bride, which I guess you might say qualifies. Night of the Living Dead was like a cheap horror movie, but obviously influential. But I suppose, like, if any of these things, why not Armageddon, Brian? It does not feel like a violation or an invalidation of what Criterion is. And it just feels, you used the phrase part and parcel earlier, part and parcel of a label that's trying to get people on board with buying a lot of movies from different parts of film history to me.
Okay. I still have questions. I still have reservations. That said, I would bet money that Armageddon's inclusion has generated more critique and more thought and discourse than 90%. Maybe that's too high. 80% of Criterion inductees. Like people are thinking and talking about this because it's in the Criterion Collection.
So you're making a different argument here. You're making an argument that its very selection is noteworthy and makes it a more interesting film.
Yes, I think I am saying that. But to get back on the rails just a bit, this is all good stuff. let me say that what I thought about as I was watching these two films this week that made me think I'm not insane to talk about Armageddon and Amadeus together is the question of highbrow versus lowbrow art. Is there a distinction? Or is the only hallmark of successful art being embraced by the people?
Okay.
I think that's very much discussed. That like is the topic of Amadeus, but I think discussing that in relation to like, does a film win Best Picture? Does a film make the contemporary equivalent of $1 billion? You know, Armageddon didn't make 1 billion, but it was the highest grossing of 1998, which at that point was like, I wrote this down to 554 million.
Well, I would also say that's the text of Armageddon too, is you have these highfalutin scientists who don't understand these working class miners, you know?
Well said. That's right. It takes all kinds in both films. Also, Dan, we'll talk about this, is that brand new in the theaters and racking up, box office returns and I think critical acclaim is Project Hail Mary, which is a story of a looming apocalyptic threat. And Will, your brother, called it competence porn. How do humans tackle an apocalyptic threat? And is it even realistic to think that we could? But maybe we need to believe and hope that we are that competent. And it kind of instills a belief in the human spirit.
I mean, isn't that one of I feel like some book or some academic came up with a list of like the 9 core plots or something, and one of them was man versus nature. So like I feel like this ties back, I mean, even to the Ten Commandments, Noah's Ark. Like how do you survive nature that would not bat an eye destroying you?
Indeed. I'm going to use that as a segue because Ten Commandments starred Charlton Heston, who is our opening narrator here in Armageddon. And he lays out that 65 million years ago, scientific consensus holds that an asteroid impact led to the extinction of the dinosaurs. He says it happened before. It will happen again. I watched Armageddon, like I said, I think 2003. I remember that I did not watch Star Wars Episode 2 or Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers in theaters in 2002. And so when the third chapter rolled out in 2003 of Lord of the Rings, I was like, oh, I got to get caught up. So I rented Two Towers. I rented Attack of the Clones. And then I thought, what the heck? What else have I been missing? And I watched Armageddon. And I liked it. I was actually pretty on board with it when I was either 12 or 13. I liked the soundtrack. I liked the production values. So I just want to say that going in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a trash film. I think it's got a lot of problems and things that I did not respond very positively to. Whether or not those are problems or features is debatable, especially given the time period. But I kind of agree with some of the people that I was quoting, maybe not quite so enthusiastically, that Michael Bay kind of knows what he's doing in putting together the types of movies that he is going to put together. And I had a odd sensation when I was watching Armageddon, and that is that it reminded me of a silent movie. It felt like a silent melodrama. I'm going to toss out there a possible way that you might evaluate whether direction is good or not. And that is like, could you make it a silent movie with just a couple of intertitles and the story still makes sense and the movie is still interesting? And I would say Armageddon actually passes that test. Like, it's got a lot of the stuff that silent movies have, like very clear characters, melodrama, but mostly just like a visual language that's very obvious and just interesting to look at. And I don't know. I found a lot to admire in it, even if it's like the cinematic equivalent of nacho cheese, you know?
I kept thinking of Frau im Mond that we watched, a year ago with Thrash, the Woman in the Moon,
Oh, yeah, I thought of that too.
Fritz Lang film from 1929. I kept thinking of it because that one was made, in consultation with rocket scientists of the day. And Armageddon, not as focused on the scientific accuracy, let's say, but still invested in the idea that let's talk about like real space exploration facilities that exist in our world.
And also kind of tied to the space exploration itself is this sort of human story, even though like what most people remember about both of them is the spectacle of the spacefaring.
Well said. Okay, so it's present day of 1998. We've had that intro that says, "Hey, asteroids are really out there. They really hit planets." And so in 1998, suddenly a storm of meteors destroys one of the space shuttles in orbit and also comes down to Earth and hits several East Coast US cities, including New York prominently. We get a big aftermath shot of the smoking Twin Towers.
Hmm. Notably pre 9/11, of course.
Right. Then it goes to mission control, and NASA's talking about, okay, well, what is going on? We got to figure this out. And the head honcho at mission control is Billy Bob Thornton. I liked this guy. The everyman. He's the So I have been very into the last couple years a show called Invincible on Amazon, and it's a superhero show. But there's a character in Invincible who is kind of the representative of like the CIA. There's this government or agency that interfaces with superheroes. So he's like the human ambassador who has to interact with superheroes. And he always has contingency plans. He's like, various defense systems and things you got to deal with when you're just a regular human who has to go up against superheroes. And so that was the vibe I was getting from Billy Bob Thornton in this movie. Just that he is the head of NASA. He's not an astronaut himself. He's going to stay earthbound, but he is a problem solver.
Yeah, I liked him as a character too. He ends up being the interface with the working class who get pulled into this. So he's kind of got this arc where he's determining like what value does that group actually bring to this project, and to what extent can we trust them as opposed to NASA's academic and brainy approach, well-educated, university degree, sitting in labs approach. So he just makes for a dramatically interesting character, I guess.
NASA goes over their charts. They also are aided by a civilian astronomer, but they determine that I guess these like Herald Harbinger rocks were knocked out of the asteroid belt by a rogue comet, they say. So I guess the thing in this movie, the big bad threat, is not an asteroid. I'm probably going to still say asteroid. I believe they say it's a comet. But also, I don't know if the math of this works. It seems like the things that it knocked out of the asteroid belt would go at the same speed as the big one. I need to see like a simulation of this. Like how do they end up arriving ahead? Really what it is it's like a slasher film. You got to have some kills, but still have the potential to avoid the bigger disaster.
Yeah. And I kind of disagree. Well, you say you need an explainer. Like, I don't need an explainer. It's sufficient. Big rock coming, chunks of it hit us first, just to give us a taste of how bad the big boy would be.
Also, by the way, the Chicxulub impactor that took out the dinosaurs is believed to have been about 6 miles wide, 10 kilometers. They determined that this one that's coming is the size of Texas. That's what we get. I looked at the map. Texas is about 800 miles wide, 800 miles north to south. So let's say that this stone, 800 miles across. Oh, and the moon is 2,200 miles across.
Okay. One thing I'll throw out there is that I'm not an expert on it. I'm sure if we had Thrash on, we could get a little bit more thorough understanding of it, or someone who's a little bit more of a space head. But basically, they have a good sense of what are the objects in outer space that could realistically hit us. They have like this big chart with the scoring system of how likely is it to hit us and also how much damage would it cause. And I suppose space is big enough that there could be surprises, but I don't think there would be like a surprise on the order of what we get here, where it's all of a sudden DEFCON 1, this thing that we didn't know was coming is about to cause total annihilation. That's the size of Texas and well within our solar system heading straight for us.
Right. They say it's going to get here in 18 days. And actually, I've been seeing headlines recently. I remember back like 10 or 12 years ago seeing headlines about an asteroid called Apophis, which at one point was projected it could potentially hit Earth. Well, apparently it's supposed to get here in 2029 and pass closer to Earth than many of our satellites.
Wow.
So that's coming. They say they revised their trajectories and it is not going to hit, but closer than satellites seems pretty close. So
Yeah.
we'll see. You're supposed to be able to see it with the naked eye. So
Oh, wow.
when it gets here.
I'll be listening to Aerosmith as it flies by.
So Billy Bob Thornton and his Thorntonites, they got to decide what do they do? And they're quickly evaluating, all these PhDs proposals. And they've got this back burner plan, which is they give Bruce Willis a call. And Bruce Willis plays a character named Harry Stamper. He's a experienced oil driller. So speaking of Texas, this is a guy who knows how to get oil out of the ground. He uses drills, and at least the rig that we see him on is like a deep sea oil rig. So he knows how to dig. He's a digger. And he leads this team that digs and drills for oil. So it's like an ensemble cast. There's a lot of names in this movie, a lot of faces.
You line them all up. You're like, wow, all those people appeared in one movie?
And sort of the first mate, the apprentice driller, is Ben Affleck. So they have like a butting heads relationship, but they're also kind of father and son a little bit. And you get the sense that, AJ, who is this Ben Affleck character, is going to inherit the mantle of the good driller, the pro king driller, alpha driller.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also tension because AJ is dating Bruce Willis's daughter, who's Liv Tyler, Dan.
Faye from That Thing You Do.
Right. And so because Liv Tyler is here, Steven Tyler is also here. He's the hovering presence of the soundtrack.
I don't think they're typically a package deal, but it would seem like there's a connection there for sure. I'm not sure who leveraged the other, or if like some studio executive brainstormed this thing and pitched him on it.
There's a couple things in this movie I think are pretty silly. I guess I'm not alone in that. And I'm not just talking about the asteroid. I'm talking about when Bruce Willis finds out that Ben Affleck is dating his daughter, he starts chasing him around and firing a shotgun on an oil rig. Which, okay, I thought you know how these things work, Bruce Willis. This seems like not a good thing to be doing on your, even if it's just a Mythbusters myth that firing a gun could explode an oil rig. Maybe that's not true. Maybe they have safety precautions. Like, this cost millions of dollars that you're responsible for. Why are you shooting holes in it?
Great point. And I don't have a good answer. It's to show that he's a rough guy who doesn't take no BS from anyone. And also he sometimes acts before he thinks.
Yeah, he can be a loose cannon. Pretty soon, though, he's whisked off to the NASA headquarters and told that one possibility they're considering is to drill into the asteroid, the comet. So send a team up there, drill a hole, and plant a nuclear bomb that will bisect the rock and cause the halves to pass the Earth.
This is goofy, but I did like the metaphor. I was like, okay, you sold me on it with this metaphor. They explain if you have a firecracker in an open hand, you might burn your hand a little bit, but the firecracker will just go off. But if you wrap your hand around a firecracker and then set it off, you'll severely damage your hand. They don't actually say that. Be like, you know what happens. I was like, I don't really know what happens.
They
but,
say your wife will be opening your ketchup bottles the rest of your life.
I was like, okay, I kind of buy that. Maybe it doesn't make real science sense, but like you've sold me on it enough for this movie to function.
Right, which is broadly how I feel about the film as a whole. It's like this, maybe the math doesn't work out, but it feels plausible enough to me to suspend disbelief, broadly. But Harry, Bruce Willis, kind of rags on the NASA nerds. He says, oh, you guys don't know what you're doing. You know, you stole my design of the drill to make this plan, but you don't really know how it works. And this is all, your calibration is out of whack. And if this needs to be done in 18 days, it needs to be me and my guys who do it. So you gotta teach the drillers to be astronauts, not the astronauts to be drillers. And I've heard people make fun of that idea. Like, I think even Ben Affleck on the commentary reel says, I asked Michael Bay, why is it easier to teach drillers to be astronauts than astronauts to be drillers? And he said, shut up. And that was the end of it.
It's very funny, by the way. We'll drop the clip of that audio recording. It's so good because he's got very good comic timing too. He may or may not have been inebriated when he was telling the story as well. It's very funny.
I think the point is it takes all kinds, and that experience is the best teacher, because it's not the drillers flying the spacecraft. They still send up, Air Force astronauts who are the pilots. The drillers are going to go up and they're going to drill. And the message is like, if you have done things for a long time, you're the best person for the job. And I think there's something to that, maybe.
I like that reading. It did feel a little bit silly in the moment. And I was like, okay, I feel like Brian's defended this notion of the story before when we've talked about it. And then when it got to the actual drilling, I was like, I don't really get why they needed a special team of drillers here, of mining experts or whatever you want to call it. I guess it's not mining. I've used that term. It's drilling for oil. But I like the reading that you need all types of expertises and people and swaths of life in order to live a rich life.
Yeah, and I think this film does a good job of suggesting a global threat. There's scenes that take place in many different countries. You see different people grappling with the news. So that was one thing I was thinking of, is like, what movies have we seen where the threat is global and like the ways that is shown? So did you ever see the movie Contagion, Dan?
No.
Well, I recommend that one. I think it's Steven Soderbergh. But that was one that I saw in like 2017. And it's like a very realistic depiction of how a pandemic would unfold. And then COVID happened, and there were a bunch of thought pieces of, oh, have people seen this movie? And I had seen that movie. But I was thinking about that, like how it shows the progression of the disaster and the different groups of people responding to it, and maybe that gets an episode someday. The takeaway from this episode should be that 250 is not the end. We're going to keep on trucking for a while.
Some of these scenes we've described of the carnage and explosions definitely evoke nuclear winter, even though this is not about countries bombing each other. There's definitely an element that kind of echoes 50s and 60s and beyond nuclear paranoia. And I think it's interesting that this came just a couple of years before 9/11, because I feel like the imagery and mood would be totally, totally different of this kind of disaster if it were post 9/11. I mean, even just, I think about, what's the J.J. Abrams one? Cloverfield. How that is an example of like a global catastrophe movie that's entirely filtered through a 9/11 aesthetic,
And the decision is, yes, we have to send up these drillers. So there's a montage of them doing the astronaut training, swimming in the pool to simulate the low gravity and moving on 3 axes.
Well, let's say who some of these people are who are,
Please.
and it's like you're like, wait, who? Wait, who? We have Michael Clark Duncan, who is a large and imposing black man, and here he plays the group's resident large and imposing black man. Owen Wilson, he shows up. Is he the one who's the deadbeat dad? Or is that somebody else?
That's no, the guy that they make a point of, he's trying to reconnect with his estranged wife and son, is Bruce Willis's friend. The character name is Chick.
Okay.
I don't recognize the actor. It was Will Patton as Chick Chapel, who does get like the D plot in this film.
And then you have Steve Buscemi as like a total horn dog and an unrelenting horn dog. Some jokes about hooking up with minors that would not, different kind of minors there, hooking up with women under the age of 18 that would not fly in 2026.
Yeah, they call him Rock Hound, and they say because he's a horn dog. So, yeah, they are on the nose about that. Always fun to watch Steve Buscemi.
Yeah.
I don't know if this role necessarily called for Steve Buscemi, but he's funny and fun.
For sure. Have you seen Con Air, Brian?
I did see Con Air.
Okay.
Was Steve Buscemi in that?
Yeah, he plays like the one who's so evil that they keep him locked up even among the other criminals.
Got it. It's been a while since I saw Con Air. Who directed Con Air? Was that Michael Bay?
Okay, no, but it's the most Michael Bay movie that's not a Michael Bay movie. It's like direct knockoff Michael Bay movie.
Got it. I almost wish Nicolas Cage were in this movie.
You know who I thought would fit in real naturally here is Matthew McConaughey. I could definitely see him. Maybe like if it was made today, that's who would be in the Bruce Willis role.
That would be a good fit. It also always amazes me how long Bruce Willis tried to hang on to his hair. Watching Sixth Sense, it's like, just let it go, man. But I guess until you commit, until you go bald, you don't know how it's going to go. But everybody is okay with Bruce Willis being bald.
Yeah, he definitely has some of the like carefully sculpted to try to minimize the impact of the balding hair going on in films from this time.
Mm-hmm. And the big day is approaching when they're going to blast off. And there's another storm of rocks that falls. Shanghai gets wiped out. I've heard a lot of people comment on the editing of this film and just Michael Bay's films in general, that it's so frantic. The pace of the cutting, very, very fast.
Well, he made commercials and stuff, music videos before he made movies, so it kind of makes sense. And maybe I'm just desensitized, or maybe I don't know, but it didn't bother me. It felt at least coherent.
It's consistent. Like the film feels intentional, and it's not so much that it takes you out of it, but it is chaotic intentionally.
Right. And maybe that's part of why it felt like a silent movie. It kind of has a almost montage feeling that was common during late silent film, with like how it's editing between places and perspectives pretty quickly to kind of sell its broader story. Before they blast off, though, we got to talk about the animal crackers scene, Brian.
Good.
It's even weirder than I remember.
And I believe that when I've mentioned Armageddon before on the podcast, it was in the context of the animal cracker scene. So there's some tension at space camp. They got to go up and they got to do this big job, and they've been locked away from their families, and the world is going to end. I would believe that tensions would run high. But specifically, it's the plot point that Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck are button heads. And Bruce Willis says, look, we need a night of shore leave, essentially. We got to be off campus for a night before we go up to space. So everybody gets to go and kind of pursue their own little narrative threads. And Ben Affleck proposes to Liv Tyler. And part of their foreplay is this, I guess is supposed to sound like David Attenborough, who I think I read just turned 100 or something. He's an old man.
Oh, wow.
Let's look this up. David Attenborough. Okay, he's 99. He's going to turn 100 in 4 days.
Oh, wow. You can do it, David.
But to me, Ben Affleck's accent sounds much more Australian. So maybe it was like a mix between David Attenborough and Steve Irwin.
Yeah, to me it sounded like what's his name? Crocodile Hunter?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was getting. But what makes this okay, so he's got animal crackers and he's like narrating it in this voice as if it's a nature documentary, but like talking about the animals going to various of Liv Tyler's private parts as if those private parts are climates or geographical features.
Yes. Will they go to the mountains or the valleys?
Right. And then, okay, that's already ridiculous and goofy enough. Then she says, I wonder if anybody out there is doing what we're doing right now. And I know she means like being intimate and silly with each other and sharing a private moment. But no, nobody in the history of mankind has ever done what you are doing right now.
Yeah, on Instagram they would say, I think this is an original experience.
Or there's like Reddit r/brand new sentences, you know? It's like that. Nobody, this has never happened before. And then it's like, okay, that's enough. And then Liv Tyler's dad starts singing, I could stay awake. It's like, okay, we go from this weird foreplay to this ridiculous statement to don't want to miss a thing. It's a special moment, Brian.
It's when it's firing on all cylinders. This is the Armageddon experience. So I like the song. We're gonna definitely talk about this because it's a song by Diane Warren.
I was going to ask if you knew that it was a Diane Warren song.
Yes. So I have learned about Diane Warren primarily through Buzzed on Movies first. They talked about Diane Warren, and then we talked about Diane Warren when we covered Ghost Dad, and she did the credits song from Ghost Dad, and her whole industry is credit songs. And she even got a Oscar-nominated documentary this year about her cottage industry of credit songs.
Yeah, and she's really tuned in with the movie industry. So most songwriters are more like in the music world, but she's more in the film world. That's where all her connections are. And so she's very well liked in the film world. So she, because it's the film world that votes on the Oscars, she gets Oscar nominations all the time. And she has some ridiculous like streak or like number of years of the past 20 years where she's been nominated, but I'm pretty sure she's never won one. And that's like the thing. She's over and over trying to win this Oscar, but it just eludes her. And yet she's still racked up like more achievements than all but just a couple of people.
And I think this is kind of regarded as her high watermark, possibly because it was the high watermark for credit songs. It was a part of the 90s blockbuster package that you had this huge radio single credit song. You know, it's coming off of Titanic. You had the movies where they had the Will Smith raps, like Men in Black and Wild Wild West, and all the pop renditions in the credits of the Disney movies.
You know, I'm sure it was in production before Titanic, but if you think about this as being like trying to recapture the Titanic spirit, and it's got a little bit of like some of what makes Titanic interesting, this crazy, immersive, over-the-top blend of CGI and physical action sequences, but also like this melodramatic character piece and romance. It actually kind of fits into that mold a little more than I had thought about.
Yeah, I think it captures the energy better than something like Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm. Which I have not seen, but I believe it.
I also like that it prominently uses the song Leaving on a Jet Plane, which I had never heard before Armageddon. But
oh, really? Yeah, it's
yeah,
a great one.
I put that on my very first MP3 player in high school and walk around with the earbuds in listening to Leaving on a Jet Plane.
I thought it was going to use Rocket Man by Elton John, because that kind of also would have fit, but they went with Leaving on a Jet Plane. One more thing. This is my second favorite movie that stars Ben Affleck and features Sweet Emotion by Aerosmith in the soundtrack. The first being, of course, Dazed and Confused, which had a very, very early Ben Affleck role and opens with Sweet Emotion by Aerosmith.
Oh man, I didn't even realize Ben Affleck was in that.
He plays the bully.
I have a cousin named Ben, and I think when Ben Affleck was young And when my cousin Ben were young, they looked like each other. I don't know. He's a handsome fella. But now they're on their way. And the plan, as we said, dig the hole, plant the bomb. They send up two space shuttles to do this. But whereas the space shuttle that got destroyed at the start of the movie was a real space shuttle, I think it was the shuttle Atlantis. These shuttles that are going up for the asteroid mission aren't real. You can't really go somewhere and see these shuttles at a museum. They're described as super shuttles, and they are named the Freedom and the Independence.
That might get confusing. Those mean the same thing.
That's a little redundant, but I guess they are redundant by design. The idea is send up two in case anything happens, because you got one shot at this, so better to have some redundancy built in.
This felt a little sweaty to me, Brian.
The whole premise is sweaty.
I mean, I feel like you would focus on getting one right rather than two that you have to now double all of your effort for everything you do. But it ends up giving us good dramatic material down the line.
Right. And let me rebut that, Dan, by saying I was actually reading recently an article about Wernher von Braun's proposal in the 70s for a Mars mission. Like the Apollo missions were ongoing. They were on like Apollo, 16 or whatever. And he was pitching, okay, well, here's what we do next. And I'll share this article in the Discord because it's pretty interesting and there's multiple steps to it. But basically, he said, okay, we need to have a space station and we need to have a pair of these shuttles that will go up and they'll refill at the space station. And then they will continue on. They'll have like nuclear reactors that power them, and they will carry on to Mars. And we'll have two just in case anything goes wrong with one. And then I was watching Armageddon. It's like, oh my gosh, they were reading Wernher von Braun's proposal. And of course, the only part of Wernher von Braun's proposal that actually got funded was we will make a space shuttle, and that's about it. But this idea of redundancy, like that, actually exists in the planning.
I don't know if we've said it, but space travel in the news recently with Artemis 2, the mission to the lunar orbit.
Indeed. They set the distance record from the planet.
Right. Furthest that anyone has ever been away from planet Earth. That we know of. We were talking, was it on the air that we were talking about the lost cosmonaut theory, Brian?
I don't think we've talked about that, unless maybe it came up in the Thrash episode, but I don't remember that.
The gist of it is that there are some people who think that the Russians might have lied about some aspect of their reporting of people in space, and there's different ways they might have done it, but that it could have been that somebody went to outer space that they could not bring back, and so might have been lost into outer space, and may or may not have had like a cyanide capsule type thing to go peacefully. But in the most extreme versions of this, someone just sat in a spaceship that floated away from Earth for days or weeks or months before the person perished.
I've also read that, like, they had a series of missions called the Luna missions, which were things that they sent up ahead, probes and landers that were made to make hard impacts, not soft landings, just things that they shot at the moon. And, like, if it made it, they gave it a Luna number. And if it didn't make it, they gave it a Sputnik number. So it's kind of lost in the shuffle.
Oh, interesting.
It was like number the mission after the result is known. And Russians are important here, too. They're a part of the space program. The first step of the adventure is, okay, the shuttles go up and they're going to link with this space station, which they just keep calling the Russian space station. I guess the 1998, I don't think they'd put the ISS together yet, so this is probably a stand-in for Mir or something. But it's a space station that's up there, and there's a crazy Russian cosmonaut on board. And just as soon as they get there, they're destroying shit. Like,
yeah,
okay, this is supposed to be a gas station, you're supposed to fill up the tank, and just immediately things are exploding. Like, this seems very dangerous at a step that it shouldn't be dangerous yet.
Yeah. I got a little lost at what was going on. Like, why is stuff blowing up in the space station? Also, they kind of insinuate that this guy was like stranded in space and so has become like a weird space loner. I don't think there are weird space loners. I could be wrong. Has there ever been somebody who's been by themselves for like years in space?
I don't think really by themselves. There was the case in the past year or so that, those folks went up on the Boeing capsule and they were supposed to come back and they ended up being up there like 9 months more than they were supposed to or something because they had to send up a SpaceX capsule to get them. But yeah, not alone. But now the Russian is along for the adventure because they blew up the whole space station, but nobody dies at this point. Everybody scrambles back onto their shuttles and they're on their way. They slingshot around the moon, and once they're around the moon, they are able to land on the rock, which is named Dottie, because the civilian astronomer hated his wife and wanted to name the asteroid after his harpy wife. Little bit of boomer humor there.
Please, my wife.
Okay, this rock that they land on. I'm on board through like 2/3 of the movie with a lot of the aspects of the design. I think when the rocks hit, that looks awesome. Like, I would imagine that it's not just digital. I think some of this stuff is miniatures that they incorporated. I don't know that for sure, but like broadly, I like the look. Once they land on this rock, I don't like the look anymore. This asteroid looks like it's full of Mountain Dew gamer fuel. It's like everything has like a glowing green look, and there are these big spikes that don't really look like the space landings that I've seen. I expect craters, I expect gray dust, but there are like these shards, and maybe that's what differentiates it as a comet, like it's supposed to suggest that it's made of ice or something, but it just looks too sci-fi to me. Up to this point, it has felt like this is a thing that could happen today. Now it's too futury.
Interesting. Yeah, I this is another one where I was thinking of that Fritz Lang film that we watched with Thrash, where the depiction of the moon, I mean, what a moon is it's just it's a big rock mostly, you know? It wouldn't have very interesting terrain. I mean, maybe it has some, but like it's a sci-fi wonderland in that movie. And that's kind of the thing here. It's like I imagine a comet or an asteroid or whatever you want to call it is just like a big rock thing flying through the air. And all of a sudden it's like a crystalline ice cavern. And yeah, it kind of glows kind of weird. On the other hand, it had character. It wasn't bland. And I was like, I guess I'd rather this, but it's pretty ugly, I gotta say. Like I kind of am with you that most of the other movie, like when it's Earthbound or in the spaceship, it feels more classic, not quite so gizmo sci-fi. And then this, it stretches it a little bit. And it also burns your eyes a little bit with its ugliness.
There's some chaos as they're landing on the rock. They don't end up where they wanted to land. Like, Bruce Willis's shuttle lands on somewhere that it's hard to drill. It's like so Steve Buscemi, they say, is this genius geologist, I guess. And he says, "You landed us on an iron plate."
Yeah, for one scene, he's a genius.
Ben Affleck, though, his shuttle crashes and kills people. Somehow not all the people. It just seems like if it crashed, everybody would be done. But
Yeah.
crucially, Ben Affleck is alive. I guess he got into this digger tank thing that they have called the Armadillo, and he's able to survive the landing.
And also the Russian survived, but Owen Wilson died, which I actually appreciated. I feel like if you're gonna have stakes and you're gonna have death and you're gonna have an ensemble, let some of the ensemble die. Too often movies bring in these characters, it would be afraid to kill them off. You gotta kill off some characters. The Scream franchise has been really bad about that recently. Characters like get stabbed and then they like, oh, they see him in a hospital bed, like, thank you for solving my almost murder. It's like, no, you just got stabbed 37 times. Like, you should be dead. Now I don't care if anyone gets stabbed because I know you're either a main character and you survive or not a main character and you die, but there's just no stakes.
That is a problem with Invincible, is people just have these grievous injuries all the time, and then because they're superheroes, it's like, oh, they're back again. Well, why did I care about what happened before? Steve Buscemi gets space amnesia. He goes crazy at one point.
No, space dementia.
Okay.
Space dementia. The very real disease of space dementia. I guess you have to be in space to get it, and I guess by dementia it means you start saying crazy things.
You start firing a machine gun in the air.
One thing I did like about the script, by the way, is I don't know if you call it lamp shading or what, but like sometimes, and it like does a good job of saying what the audience is thinking there. And it kind of it risks verging into, well, that happened type humor, but I thought it was pretty well calibrated, like riffing on the thing that was happening in a jokey way, even if the thing was serious, but without undercutting the thing. And Steve Buscemi gets a couple of those lines throughout the film.
And even though they're not positioned ideally, Bruce Willis starts digging with his drill machine. He's going slow, and Billy Bob Thornton is monitoring it from the ground as the rock is getting closer and closer to Earth. And they're adding up the numbers. Is the drill going to get where it needs to get in time? Because it seems like it's too slow. They say they have to dig the hole 800 feet deep. 800 feet. 800 feet, Dan. This rock is 800 miles wide.
So it was like a pinprick.
Yes, so I would think you, for this to work, the firecracker analogy, you need to bury it at the center. Bury it at the middle to split it in half. 800 feet is 1/5000th of 800 miles, Dan.
Good point. Didn't think about it in the moment. Kind of dumb.
Just say it's a bigger number. I mean, I buy that it would be hard to dig a hole 800 feet deep. I've never had to dig a hole 800 feet deep, but that just doesn't add up for me.
Well, the interesting thing about digging deep holes is actually, and often the harder part is how do you get rid of the stuff that you are digging? It's not like penetrating deeper, but it's like removing the stuff so you can continue to go down.
It actually kind of pisses me off that we've never dug that deep, really. I mean, like in the 70s, there was some project called Project Mohole where they were going to dig to the mantle, and they didn't get very far, and then they stopped. At least that's what they say. Maybe they found mole people and they just don't want us to know, but I want to know. I want to say, you know, okay, we've sunk a craft down to the deepest part of the ocean. Why can't humans dig a deep enough hole to get to the mantle? How do we even know there's really a mantle down there if we've never dug a very deep hole?
Great questions, Brian.
Those are my thoughts on digging deep holes. You know, you do 250 podcast episodes, you try to talk about something different every time. You get to things like that.
Should we be digging deeper holes on Earth in life?
But they're creeping along, and there's dissension in the ranks down on Earth because the military says, this is not going fast enough. We gotta exercise the nuclear option.
Which is literally the nuclear option.
Yeah. They want to set up the bomb early. And so they're ready to hit the button, even though the bomb is out on the surface of the rock and not in the hole like it needs to be. And Billy Bob Thornton is resisting this. And there's a dispute on two fronts, both on the ground and up on the rock, because for a scene, the like military attaché that's part of the crew, he's got like a gun in Bruce Willis's face saying, okay, the military says bomb goes off now. And Bruce Willis says, but the bomb can't go off now. That won't work. You'll just kill us and not destroy the rock. I liked that Keith David was the general in charge of the army, who is maybe like a Colin Powell stand-in.
Oh, I forgot Keith David was in this. Yeah, I love Keith David.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say too, is I love Keith David. Great voice, great presence. He can be funny. He can be serious. He was Goliath in Gargoyles.
He was in They Live also, and he was in Community. He gives one of the great line readings in Community. Now there's a man who knows how to marry his cousin.
But the decision that the military guy on the ship makes is that he is won over by Bruce Willis. He's going to help Bruce Willis. They disarm the self-destruct on the nuke, which I think could have knock-on problems. Like, oh, what? They're dismantling it? They need the bomb, though. It's like,
right.
They probably shouldn't be digging around in the wires, but I guess they have to.
This is a a moment where I liked the Billy Bob Thornton character because he's also kind of facing the same dilemma as like, do you trust the men that you have put up there to do it who say they can do it, or do you go with the so-called government expertise? And it's kind of like an inflection point for him there,
Hmm.
or the point where he's got to kind of decide, and he waffles, but then of course he ends up siding with Bruce Willis because how could you not?
Right. Yeah, there's talk that the president wants to set the bomb off. We never actually see who the president is. I was curious.
Mm.
This is one of those movies that it was a twin of another movie, which was Deep Impact, came out the same year. And in Deep Impact, the president is Morgan Freeman, who I thought is a cool pick for somebody to get to play the president.
For sure. Yeah. I liked when the president's men came in though, and they came like marching in. Like I was thinking of like Letty Riefenstahl, like the Nazis marching in, dun, dun, dun. Or like oh, you know what it really made me think of was Fritz Lang's Metropolis. Like when you have the workers come in.
Yeah, they're very robotic. But then they hit like a gas pocket or something that damages the drill. They haven't made it to 800 feet yet. So they got to make the call to the Earth of, oops, we blew it. Didn't work. And then there's a little montage scene of everybody on the Earth embracing death. Like Toy Story 3, they're all joining hands.
Well, what it's really like now that we've made the Titanic connection is the scene in Titanic where we see the people who have accepted that the boat is sinking and like holding hands and in preparing for their icy graves.
I wonder, Dan, how many people died in this moment? How many people took the cyanide capsules?
Oh, that's a good question. There are definitely a lot of deaths on Earth, though. Like when those rocks are coming down and blowing stuff up, like when they're even though they're just little fragments, that's pretty bad. But you're right. If this is the moment where the entire world has been informed, the planet's ending in about, I don't know, what is it, 15 minutes or something like that?
Yeah. The final, like, forerunner rock that hits is the worst one, and it takes out Paris. So, R.I.P. Gavin. As well as, several million other people, I guess.
There's a Simpsons gag where they're watching news, and then the kicker is Paris, the city of lights is burning, and then Homer just casually turns it off.
But wouldn't you know it, Ben Affleck made it through, and he's driven his armadillo across the wasteland. I liked the way that they used the low gravity, that he's got to jump a crevasse in the thing, and he can do it because the gravity is low.
Yeah, every little conflict turns into a set piece. It's kind of fun.
Yeah. So he gets there and he's able to drill the last little bit, and so they have the camaraderie and the proof that Ben Affleck can hold his own, and he's really a great driller.
Which basically means saying, no, keep pushing, you can do it! Harder down!
You need to believe I can continue to drill.
That's the key. That's why they had to have send up Bruce Willis. You couldn't have a space guy do that. No, it's got to be a driller. Keep pushing! Keep going! We're almost to 800!
They drill the hole, they get the bomb down there, and the seconds are ticking away before it reaches 0 point, the point of no return, where it has to have the button pressed or it's going to be too close to Earth for the splitting to matter. But they've lost the ability to remotely trigger the bomb. And I don't remember if they say why this is, but I have to imagine it has something to do with them fucking around with the wires. Like, you blew it. It's like the only reason that the remote is not working now is because there was this whole kerfuffle. But somebody has to stay behind to set off the bomb manually. And this is what really had me thinking of Woman in the Moon, because that had the discussion of, oh, well, not everybody can come back now. So who stays? Who stays on the celestial body? And they draw straws. Ben Affleck gets the short straw. But at the last moment, Bruce Willis sacrifices himself. He yoinks the air hose on Ben Affleck, and he's got to stay in the craft. That seemed pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
Did he know how that was going to work? It's like, okay, but it's noble.
Yeah, no, it's a good character moment. I did have the impression, wait, is he actually just going to accidentally kill Ben Affleck here?
My eyeballs could have been sucked from their sockets.
But I like the dynamic because it creates this tear-jerking thing because there have been a whole bunch of conversations between Bruce Willis and Liv Tyler about, are you a good dad? Are you going to come back? How much am I glad that you were an unconventional dad? Because he's a single dad as part of it too. And he promises her that he's going to come back, but then he has to break his promise in order to save all of humanity, but also to pass on, to let her move on. So it's also like a coming of age story for her because she separates from her parent and gets to be with the man that she loves and start a family with him.
Right. Yeah. Parents leave the world to their children. And here, literally.
Have grown up animal cracker time with him.
That's right. And so Bruce Willis stays up there to press the button as they take off, and they come back to Earth as heroes. And as it shakes out, Liv Tyler and Ben Affleck get married under the end credits rolling as the Steve Tyler song is playing.
This was another moment that felt like a silent film to me because some of those silent films, particularly the D.W. Griffith variety, and I'm thinking specifically of Birth of a Nation, end with like this angelically shot wedding scene. Like that's how it ends, is like it's like oversaturated lights and just has this sort of divinity aura around it. And that's kind of how this wedding is shot too. Not to lump it in with the most racist movie ever made.
White womanhood is saved. I mean, that was probably the highest grossing film in 1915, and now we got the highest grossing film in 1998. So, blockbusters.
Really, every movie is just variations on Birth of a Nation.
Yeah, so Diane Warren wrote this song. Don't want to miss a thing.
Don't want to close my eyes. Don't want to fall asleep 'cause I miss you, babe. And I don't want to miss a thing.
Even when I dream of you, the sweetest dream would never do. I'd still miss you, babe. And I don't want to miss a thing.
It's kind of a dumb turn of phrase. It's like, I don't want to fall asleep because I'd miss you and I don't want to miss a thing. It's like trying to do a play on words of like missing something, like that something that's happening in front of you. Like, oh, I didn't see it. I missed it. But also like missing, like, oh, I feel in my heart that I want to be near you. Except the wordplay doesn't quite land for me, I gotta say.
Yeah, it's like every moment is precious. So even just falling asleep, you're missing out on stuff. I guess.
Yeah, maybe. Who can say?
But yeah, at least in the recent episode of Buzzed on Movies when they were discussing Diane Warren's career and the Diane Warren documentary and the fact that all these tries, she's never won the Oscar. That the closest she came was Don't Want to Miss a Thing with Armageddon. But she didn't win, Dan. Because she was up against Prince of Egypt and Stephen Schwartz.
Oh, man.
Who won with When You Believe. There can be miracles when you believe.
There we go.
And so Diane Warren persisted in the shadows of inadequacy, of mediocrity.
Oh, man.
She did not attain the miraculous legacy.
The movie podcast called The Big Picture. The two hosts are Amanda Dobbins and Sean Fennessy. And this is probably the movie podcast I listen to most often by someone who is not somebody who I know.
That's high praise.
Yeah. They always talk about how good Sean is at taking like a strand of conversation and directing it back to the next movie or the next topic or something like that. So that was a good Sean Fennessy impression right there.
Good, I'm glad. Because our next movie is Amadeus. We've certainly talked about this movie quite a few times. It's come up in conversation. It was due an episode. So what is your past with Amadeus?
I watched it in college and I loved it. And then I watched it again in like, I can't remember. I don't think it was on my honeymoon. I think it was our 1 year anniversary because we did trips on our anniversary for the first several years of our marriage. I think it was our first anniversary. We went to Miami and then we drove through Florida, the Keys and stuff. Anyways, I think we stayed at one of the Keys, or like a luxury hotel or resort type thing. for a couple nights in one of the keys, and one of the only DVDs they had was Amadeus. And so we watched Amadeus there. I was like, man, this movie really is really great. And then I watched it again when I was doing a rewatch of all of the movies that I'd ever included on my top 100. Loved it then too, wrote a review of it. And so this is probably my fourth, I think, time watching it. And I would guess either first or second time watching the theatrical cut. So I went out of my way to watch the theatrical edit instead of the director's cut this time.
Interesting.
What about you, Brian?
This was one that for years and years I'd heard, oh, it's a great film. You know, it's one gets brought into conversation with lots of other films of that ilk, you know, Godfather, Citizen Kane. Just it has a large reputation. Also, I had heard of it because my parents got married in 1984, and some of the stories of around when they got married involved that they went to see Amadeus in the theater. Also, the Ethiopian famine that we talked about in our We Are the World episode. Those are like their two anecdotes from newlywed days.
Okay. Don't know why famines came up too often.
I don't know. It was part of the culture, man.
Yeah, it was the zeitgeist.
We are the world.
I almost just broke out into a Bob Dylan singing in We Are the World.
I was about to too, but as simple as the lyrics are, I forgot them. I couldn't remember if it's a brighter day or a better day, just like they cannot remember in the documentary. One of them keeps saying the other one that it's not supposed to be.
Right.
Has to get corrected.
Go listen to that episode for a little bit of goods, for a memorable goods moment.
Yes. So we've talked about what is the 250th spectacular going to entail. You know, long-term listeners, that every 50 episodes or so we do a kind of retrospective, a look back, a look forward. And Dan has proposed that we need to make some kind of index key to explain ourselves, the functional asterisk that will let newcomers understand the lore.
Maybe. It's a work in progress of an idea. We'll see.
Yes. I think it could be fun. I don't know that we necessarily need that, but to create a document like that, it could be interesting.
We can noodle on it. I think we can come up with like a format that would make for an actual fun discussion and not just remember when.
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
What do they call it? Something coined the phrase member berries. Have you heard this one before?
Yeah, that was South Park.
Okay. That's like a type of humor, a type of like conversation is just remember that thing? That was great. Remember that thing? That was great.
Oh, yeah. And so I've done a little bit of stand-up comedy. I'll have to delve into that more at some other time. But I found that the biggest laugh is just reference something from the 90s. From whenever your audience was young, reference that and you'll get the best reaction. Like, definitely the biggest laugh was I was just talking about Beauty and the Beast. It's like, oh, they remember that.
You decoded it, the human brain.
Mm-hmm. But Amadeus. So, I had heard of it. I hadn't seen it for a long time. I finally checked it off in maybe like 2019. I don't think COVID had happened yet the first time I saw it, but it was comparatively recently, you know? We're already talking maybe 7 or 8 years ago, but after college was finally the first time I saw this movie, and it blew me away. This is a great, great movie. Like, it lived up to the hype.
Yeah. I don't think I'd put it quite in the rarefied air of like a Citizen Kane or a Casablanca in terms of its repute, but it's maybe like one tier below that. And part of what makes it great, well, in that it's a beloved achievement, but that like people still recognize like, damn, that's a movie. Like they really made the crap out of that movie. But also, I think this is kind of maybe the impetus for why he selected it, is it's like, in some ways, the peak of like costume drama production. And by costume drama, I don't just mean like movies that have great costumes, although this does, but like movies that take place sometime usually in like the 18th or maybe 19th century that have like a sort of old-fashioned vibe about them and explore like an older way of life. And yes, I pretty much agree with you that it is a great movie.
So this tells the story of the relationship between Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, the famous composer, and Antonio Salieri, the less famous composer. You know, you've heard of Mozart. You may not have heard of Salieri, and therein lies the plot. There's more to it than that, but that's the crux.
Yeah.
One of the top letterboxed reviews was just, "This is Squidward and SpongeBob." I quite liked that, picturing it that way.
Elaborate on that, Brian.
Well, have you watched much SpongeBob?
I've watched a fair amount through the years. Yeah.
Okay. So, well, let's talk about the plot, and then maybe we come back to that. But
Okay.
I think it's apt because I mean the dynamic is that Squidward is a curmudgeon, and he's kind of closed off to the world, and he thinks of himself as an artist. I don't think SpongeBob thinks of himself as an artist, but he's the sunnier and more popular personality.
Okay. I guess I can see that. I just don't think of SpongeBob in the same way that I do the way Mozart is depicted here on a couple different ways. But
Yeah, it's not one to one for sure. And that is why I really love this movie is that I've experienced it different ways. I've appreciated different nuances as I've watched it more times because I've probably watched it every other year since I saw it the first time. So this was at least the fourth time, it might have been the fifth time that I watched it. And it's a pretty long movie. At least you mentioned there's a theatrical cut, which is about 2.5 hours, and there's an extended quote unquote director's cut, which is 3 hours on the dot. And now all you can find is the director's cut.
I hate that about like movies and releases is particularly in the streaming era, they typically go for the director's cut of these things. But I feel like at least two-thirds of the time, and probably something more like 90% if you're really digging more into it, the theatrical cut is shorter and probably better, and certainly a better entry point for most movies. Now you do have your Blade Runners where like they truly butchered it when they released it, but like uh, you know the phrase "kill your darlings." Sometimes directors who come up with the ideas get attached to things or might not have the clearest vision about what an audience would want to take in. And more to the point of what you just said is like if you're really going to like have these alternate versions, surface that, make that clear. Don't just like eradicate the original cut.
Yep. So I'm pretty sure the first time I watched it, it was the theatrical because it was definitely different the second time that I watched it. So I believe it was director's cut second time. And just every time since then, what comes up when I look it up is the director's cut.
Hmm.
I prefer the director's cut. We will talk about why. I just really think it changes the perspective. I mean, it's still like the narrative makes sense. There, it didn't feel like anything was missing when I watched the shorter version, but it adds an important wrinkle when it's the extended version.
I have a specific wrinkle that I think it's changed. We can see if we're talking about the same wrinkle.
I think we are, but yes, we'll get there. Now, this was inspired by reality, but is not historically accurate. Like, this is not what really went down. There really was a Mozart. He really died young. There really was a Salieri. They really knew each other. They were both contemporary composers. Like, they were peers.
Right, and Salieri was involved late in the life of with Mozart, but very differently from how it was here. I did a quick read of their respective Wikipedia pages as well as the Death of Mozart Wikipedia page.
Oh, I'm interested to hear what you found because I have questions. I think humanity at large has questions.
Well, I can tell you we don't have concrete answers. We have a whole lot of guesses, but no concrete answers.
Because he was, what, 35, I think, when he
Yeah.
died. And for some reason, I thought he was part of the 27 club of like the rock and roll musicians who died at 27. No, he lived a little past that.
So I'll bring it up now. I went through a really big classical music phase around 2016, 2017. I like listened to the series of lectures that totally transformed the way I thought about classical music by Robert Greenberg called How to Understand and Appreciate Great Music. And it's by the Great Lectures series. and it's like I don't even remember how many, but a few dozen lectures on the history. Basically, talk starts at the beginning and then goes to modern day on what we call classical music. Although he suggests the term concert music is probably better because classical is like an era. In fact, the Mozart era is called the classical era of music. One rule when he talked about Mozart is he said, I use the Mozart plus 20 rule when thinking about Mozart's achievements because he like wrote his first opera at age like 12 or 13 or 14, and he was writing stuff and hitting all these milestones at crazy young ages.
Yeah, he was like touring and playing when he was 4 or something.
Yeah. And he said, just take whatever age Mozart did a thing and add 20 years to that, and that's like what it should be. So it feels better, it makes more sense if you just add 20 more years to it. So Mozart died at 55, still very sad, still pretty young, but he didn't make a lot out of those 35 years on Earth.
Right. And what I found interesting is so this movie is an adaptation of a play by Peter Shaffer, who went on to write the screenplay for the movie. But the play came out in 1979, and the play was inspired by an earlier play by Alexander Pushkin called Mozart and Salieri from 1830.
Oh,
1830, Dan. So
wow.
like contemporary, like Salieri is dying in the movie in 1823, and already they're spinning these dramas like 5 years later. It's like ripped from the headlines.
I did not know that. That's crazy.
So it was not a new idea that maybe these two dudes had a rivalry.
Hmm.
And also I want to say that I've found I really love movies about obsession. Like obsessive rivalry, that's going to be a good movie. Uh,
Okay.
The Prestige is one of my favorite movies. We also talked about the obsession in Whiplash recently. Just the idea that this thing that you're into is the most important thing in the world, and you need to pursue it to your own doom. A normal person might step back from the brink, might say, maybe this isn't worth ruining my health and my life over. Maybe there are other things than high opera or whatever it is you happen to make,
Hmm.
jazz drumming or magic tricks. But no, you're gonna run the train off the rails,
Right.
and I'm gonna watch.
One of the reasons I love this movie is it considers that through a lot of different lenses. And part of it is we're like getting it through the perspective of an aged Salieri, narrating what happened in the past. But he's not an unreliable narrator, but he is, whenever we get his monologues, we know that it's because he's at the time when the movie starts in essentially an insane asylum, claiming that he murdered Mozart, which gets investigated to like what extent did he murder it? And so it's like also wrapped in this subjective viewpoint. And then it's tied in with all these other themes about wealth and class and taste. And the big one that just drives it so much is God and divine. And like, what is the purpose of art? And what is the purpose of prostrating our gifts for the God and the world that we serve? Just extremely fascinating and well realized depiction of somebody struggling through these things and only debatably coming up with any interesting answers, I would say.
Hmm. Yes, I agree. I gotta say, this might be the best movie title of all time.
Really?
Amadeus. Amadeus means beloved by God, God's beloved,
Oh,
which was part of Wolfgang Amadeus's Mozart's name. So it's not from thin air. Like it's relevant to the person. You know who it's about when they say Amadeus. But also that he is beloved by God is the gist of the story. That's the whole conflict.
well,
Salieri cannot accept that he is beloved by God, that Mozart is the chosen one.
Right. And I think we get that from Salieri's perspective, and it does not concretely answer is what Mozart has been given truly like ultimately a blessing for Mozart, you know? Because obviously it is for the world, this music that we got out of him, but in many ways, his gift and compulsion for music, which is mirrored in different ways in Salieri, is just ends up being the end of him in some ways, you know?
Yes, I'm glad that you said that. It's an important thing I wanted to hit on, which is that the first time I watched this movie, I kind of took it at face value from Salieri's verbal perspective. Like the words that Salieri uses to describe what he's seeing, I took it that way, which is this is sort of Toy Story. This is the guy who was there first in the privileged position, the chosen one of the monarch is Salieri, who he's telling this story in the asylum of his life, and that he was a composer, aspired to be a composer. His father didn't like that Salieri wanted to be a composer, and then choked on a chicken bone at dinner and expired. And then Salieri took that as a divine sign that, oh, now I can follow my passion. Now I can go and be a composer, be a mover and a shaker. And he gets appointed as the court composer in the court of Holy Roman Emperor Joseph II. This is a good gig. Like,
Right.
hard to get a better job as a composer in this time period, which is 1774. That's where we spend most of our time.
It really struck me that that moment where we see the father die, choke and die. Upon rewatches, that's the moment for me where we say, okay, don't take the viewpoint of Salieri at face value, because he doesn't just say, and then my father died, and then he said, and then a miracle occurred, and we see his father choking and dying. It's like most people would not consider that a miracle in your life. And it's also not that he was like an abusive dad or anything, like evil. He was just like, you shouldn't be a composer. That's not what you do, but that's what he wanted to do. And so the miracle is his dad suddenly died, which, as someone who's had their dad suddenly died, I'm not calling that a miracle.
Yeah, that wasn't how you felt about it. So
No.
it gives you a little inkling of the kind of person that Salieri is.
One more important thing is that he like declares that he is giving all of his being to God to create music, including he is going to be celibate. He is not going to take a partner, a wife. He is going to let all of his human energies pour into music, which then gets weirdly twisted in his obsession and fascination with Mozart, I would say.
Yes. So he's made this bargain unprompted with God. He'll never have sex in exchange for divine musical inspiration. Which actually, Dan, I feel like something we were talking about recently. Oh, it was about criminals in movies. It might have been with what was the one with Kevin Spacey?
Oh, The Usual Suspects?
The Usual Suspects. You say, does being obsessed with crime make you gay? Well, does being obsessed with music make you gay? I don't know. Does being obsessed with anything, with a rival, does it tend that way?
Alfred Hitchcock would say yes.
Yeah. Yeah, like Rope or various Hitchcockian properties.
And one more thing before we really dive in here is I want to give a shout out to Mitch, the host of the Movie Call podcast, and also been on the pod and active on the Discord. He's been watching and talking about all of the best pictures he hasn't seen in chronological order on the Movie Call podcast. And so I don't know if he's actually seen Amadeus. I'm guessing he has because he's pretty strong on movie history because he watched a lot of TCM growing up. But he was also talking about Toy Story, and he wrote a pretty interesting letterbox journal entry on Toy Story 3 as like a Christian tale and a religious parable. So go check that out.
Yes. So back on track with Toy Story. My first watch, I saw Amadeus pretty closely matching with Toy Story, which is that you've got this one person in the privileged position where he is the favorite of the king. So here, Andy equals Joseph II. But then some new guy shows up on the scene who's better in every way, who has the juice, who has all the laser light functions and wows everybody and supplants, usurps Woody. Salieri is thrown aside. All the wallpaper and posters get changed. But on second watch, that's not really what happens. With a step back, with a new perspective, you see actually Salieri's life is better and Mozart's life is worse than Salieri seems to appreciate.
Oh, absolutely. It's just tinged with irony because he has this cushy gig and like more respect. People like admire him.
Everybody laughs at his jokes. He's the coolest guy in the room. Like, Salieri's got it going on.
But he can't. Part of his personal choice is that he is the music guy, the guy who is through his divine connection of making great music as the right hand of God, taking that divinity and turning it into music, becomes a respected and admired person. And all of the self-sacrifice that he put into that and all of the little bits of loss that went into that. And then here comes Mozart, just the impish guy who obviously has the divine spark more than Salieri does, but he's just a little shit, you know?
He's a weirdo. People are off put by him.
Yeah.
So the play by Peter Shaffer, the original cast was Ian McKellen as Salieri and Tim Curry as Mozart.
Oh my gosh.
I would pay so much money to see this. I don't think there's a recording.
Oh, that's incredible.
Like that's fantastic. And then later on, Tim Curry got replaced by Mark Hamill.
Right.
Which would also be interesting to see.
And apparently Mark Hamill was first in line to be cast in this movie, but Milos Forman, the director, said, "No, you're Luke Skywalker," and that would be distracting.
Mm-hmm. This is a little unfortunate, and I think people have come to accept Mark Hamill in other roles, at least as a voice actor.
Yeah.
Mark Hamill has had a very prolific voice acting career,
right?
Most notably as the Joker, but for instance, he's in Invincible as the superhero tailor, like The Incredibles, like Edna Mode in The Incredibles. He makes the super suit.
One more thing I want to say is I liked your setup, even though you ended up kind of picking away at it, your setup of Amadeus as Toy Story. But one thing I would posit in both Toy Story and Amadeus is that instead of Andy and instead of the king, it's actually God in both of those cases, to some extent. A thing that is divine and above you and a layer beyond you, and you have a position of power through that, but also it's like something you can't really question or pierce through and is almost like the meaning of life intrinsically.
Salieri first encounters Mozart at a party in 1774. So much of this presentation I admire. I mean, it's shot in the actual palaces where these events were going on, like in Prague, in Vienna, that still exist. These buildings are around, and like this, just the palatial nature of it. It throws me for a loop that he knows of Mozart, but he doesn't know what Mozart looks like because there's no photography.
Right.
So he's walking around the party. Does talent show on the face? A lot of narration in this movie, which can be a mixed bag in film. You know, some people say show, don't tell. I really like the narration here.
In the comments of my review site, I was complaining about narration in a movie, and our pal Nate was opining what makes good narration versus bad narration. And I think things that reveal stuff about the character that you wouldn't otherwise know, and like where the character is kind of involved in it and the narration is kind of involved in it in a certain way, make it much more interesting than just describing a thing. And I think this movie is outstanding in that regard. I think it's got excellent narration.
And he finally turns a corner and encounters Mozart, who is this strange little man. He's got this high-pitched voice, and he's always making shit jokes, which is real. I mean, like, if you look up Mozart's total body of work, he's got these little, like, ribbled poem songs called Lick Mir on Mine Arsch. It's like lick my asshole. And so not necessarily what you would expect from this highbrow personage, this god of music that he's making scatological humor. And that's Salieri's reaction. He's like, what is this?
Right. And he's got this very distinctive laugh that whenever it's good every time it gets used. It's always shocking and always off-putting. And it gets dramatically used at the very end of the movie too, as like almost a sign of like being a little unhinged.
Yeah. And I don't know if there's historical evidence for that, but it definitely is a hallmark of the film. And I love how you'll get like reaction shots to other people reacting to this laugh, that it's not normal to them.
Oh, another thing that they show that Mozart is really into, which I do know was pretty common for like great composers, was like doing essentially improv like performances of musical pieces for like entertainment purposes. It's like a dueling piano bars type thing, if you've ever been to one of those, where just plays piano to entertain people. And the scenes where that happens are really good. And that is something that both Mozart and Beethoven were known for. And that's the kind of thing is like if you could get recordings of something like Mozart just entertaining people by like taking known songs and doing like crazy riffs on them and stuff, that would be an awesome thing to have seen.
Mozart is played by Tom Hulce. At least I think that's the pronunciation. The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah.
I love the whole dynamic of the court because the king is played by Jeffrey Jones. You know, disgraced Jeffrey Jones. He was involved in some child porn stuff. Not great.
No.
But
And
he has some funny roles. I mean, as an actor, he it's art versus the artist, but he's definitely got, I mean, he was the principal in Ferris Bueller and he was Criswell in Ed Wood.
and he's funny in I haven't seen the whole movie, but the clips I've seen in Beetlejuice.
Right.
So
And if you look at paintings of Joseph II, it's uncanny, honestly. It's a good pick in the role. I don't know very much about the Holy Roman Empire. One of the little plot threads, one of the themes in this film is the idea of nations and nationalism, which was kind of burgeoning at this point in history. So this is the 1700s. Germany didn't exist. Austria didn't exist. Italy didn't exist. But it was these groups of peoples. Like there were people who identified as Germans and there were people who identified as Italians. And they were kind of forging territorial national identity. And so the Holy Roman Empire specifically is a mess. It was like a bunch of little duchies that were kind of in a confederation, but it wasn't Germany yet. And he's in Vienna, they're in Vienna, so Austria now, but at this point, part of this Holy Roman Empire. And I think they just call him the Emperor of Austria in this movie to kind of make it easier, but it's hard to keep track of if you're actually like studying the historical record.
also noteworthy, they talk a lot about the languages that things should be in, and it's all in English.
Yes,
Everybody speaks English.
I noticed that this time that the only person who has a German accent is the fruity Perückenmacher, the guy selling the wigs. Like, this is funny? Yeah.
But then, yeah, and then they'll like throw in snatches of Italian or something in there.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the idea is like they're speaking German, so if we hear Italian, it's the way Germans would have heard Italian. But it definitely gets you thinking a little bit about it. It's like All Quiet on the Western Front too.
Mm-hmm.
They're German people, but they're just speaking normal English. And I guess it makes sense because it's made for American audiences by an American production company. And honestly, I think I would like this movie less if we didn't have the beautiful turns of phrase in a language that I know coming out of Salieri's mouth.
Right. But yeah, there is some discussion of the kind of national stereotypes that, oh, Italians are very romantic and proper opera should come from Italy. And that this is a German court or, Austria, but people speaking German, and they're saying, oh, well, German is a brutal language. That's the language of barbarians.
Right.
But of course, Mozart is Austrian and Salieri is Italian.
And this, by the way, is a real thing in classical music. From that lecture series I did, is there was a lot of discussion of the nature of languages with regards to how it inspires the quality of music. And it's basically what you described, but like the consensus came to be that Italian was the right balance of florid and rhythmic compared to like French, which is overly soft, and German, which is much too bum 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 in the way that it translates to sung music. Mozart was noteworthy and is the reason that he's often like placed at the top tier, like maybe a tier above all the other historical composers, is he had an incredible corpus of instrumental music and an incredible corpus of operas. He was one of the best at both of them, and there haven't been too many composers who really shined in both of those disciplines. And this movie spends a lot more time on the operas, but we do see him some of his instrumental pieces as well. But like you think about Beethoven, he did the instrumental music, or you think about like Wagner, he did the operas. And so there were definitely some people who wrote in both, but like Mozart is like the king of someone who broke ground and did incredible, remarkable work in both disciplines.
This is kind of moving backwards, but I love the introduction of the movie when Salieri is playing the melodies that he wrote, and then he plays the melody that Mozart wrote, and the guy is talking to us like, "Oh, I know that one."
Yeah.
Which is the point.
Well, in my head, that was the very first scene of the movie, but there's like a little intro sequence as well. I feel like you don't need the intro sequence. That's like a perfect opening scene.
Mm-hmm.
You also gather that he's a little bit mad during that sequence as well.
Right. I agree. I find it fascinating how the profession of being a composer is depicted here. Because obviously you got to be educated to be a composer, but it's almost blue collar here. It's like menial compared with these other court ministers. The artist serves at the pleasure of the monarch, and in that regard is treated as a servant. And you don't really think today of an artist being a servant, but the way that art worked then and arguably still works now is on the patronage system. People want art, they want to have art around them, and so they pay the artist. And at least back in the day, it was like they would commission specific projects, and that still happens, of course. It's like, I want the Sistine Chapel painted, Michelangelo, so here is some money, go and do it.
And it goes even further than that. So one of the Louis, the one who was around forever, the fat one, so like whole branches of music and styles of music became standard, like the waltz, for example, because he liked them. And it was like he's the guy who's making the decisions on what gets commissioned and which artists get the money. And just this one guy happened to like waltzes. So now like we have a whole history of waltz music and what that sounds like and stuff. It's kind of fascinating.
There's also discussion of the concept of highbrow versus lowbrow art and high class versus low class. Like what do the different classes appreciate? There's a scene where they're walking through the marketplace and there's a few different kinds of entertainment on display. There's like a proto Punch and Judy show, and there's a fire breather, and really like what they're doing is not that different from what the composers have to do. It's like they gotta grab attention, they gotta entertain the people. But there's, debate over where would the music that I make be successful. It's like, does it have to be in the court of the king, or could it be among the commoners? Later in the movie, there's this lower class theater environment. And one thing, if I knock this movie for anything, I can't really tell the difference between the operas as far as this is a high class opera and this is a low class opera. Other than, there is that show that the actor Schikaneder does where it's like horses pooping. It's like, okay, this is the lowbrow. But then Mozart makes a show for that theater, which seems comparable to the other shows that he's made. So I don't really know.
Hold on, Brian. I think you stumbled into a point without realizing you stumbled into a point. I think that is a point of the movie, is that it is kind of the same and it is all of artistic merit. And so who are we to say what is highbrow and what is lowbrow? I think the effect you just described is very intentional.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think you are right and I am right and we are right together.
And that's another miraculous thing about Mozart, is that all of his great works in all of these modes were like really consistently great, whether he was doing the comic German operas or the dramatic Italian operas or the instrumental compositions, is that he was like groundbreaking in all of them and effective in all of them and good instincts in all of them.
So Mozart shows up in this world, this Viennese court, and Salieri instantly knows that Mozart has the goods. Mozart has the divine spark and is just insanely, a once in a century talent, artistic genius. But what is interesting, and I didn't realize until the second time I watched the movie, is that other people don't cotton on to that right away.
No, Salieri knows enough to recognize it, and also the people around him don't know enough to recognize it, which puts Salieri in that position where he can like adjudicate verbally to other people, but he knows in his soul that Mozart has the goods.
Mm-hmm. And so this is the story of Salieri, his disgust and disbelief that an imp like Mozart has been chosen as God's beloved, has had this divinity poured into him that Salieri doesn't have, that gradually drives Salieri mad and to dark deeds. He's going to push Buzz out the window. But simultaneously, due both to what Salieri's doing as well as his own vices, Mozart is drifting towards destitution despite his genius. Like, this, in addition to Best Picture, it also won Best Makeup. Like, you see Mozart deconstructed here.
Right. It is impressive how he looks more and more frail and like disheveled as the movie goes.
He's going through it. I really like how it shows that Mozart is almost magic, though. Just the degree to which he is talented. Every time it happens, it's incredible. Like when he walks in and there's this piece that Salieri wrote to be performed and welcome Mozart in, but the king wants to play it and the king isn't very good at playing the piano, and so it's like that makes it awkward that he's hobbling through this piece that Salieri wrote and kind of wanted to perform himself. And then Mozart just immediately is commenting on how amateurish it is, and he's memorized it. He's heard it for, 30 seconds or whatever, and he can instantly replay the whole piece from memory. Just one hearing and it's burned in.
And this is based off of documented record that he was an incredible transcriber of music. So there's a debated claim. There was this famous piece by the composer Allegri, the Miserere, which was like this piece of church music that was like guarded, and it was only performed, I think, once every 10 years or something like that, and was like known as the most beautiful piece of music in its day. And it really is beautiful. But Mozart went to it when he was age 14 and was able to do a full transcription of it, just listening to it one time.
That's bonkers. Then later on, Mozart is trying to get a royal post, basically be a music teacher. And Salieri's got clout, that he's got influence over whether or not Mozart gets this position. And Salieri is starting to put the screws to Mozart, using whatever leverage he has to make things harder for Mozart. And so Mozart has to apply for the position. He's got to submit his portfolio. And this miffs Mozart. And somebody says, one of the other courtiers says, some humility would suit you, Mozart. I agree. I think things would be easier for Mozart in this movie if he were occasionally more humble.
But it's his compulsion. He has to speak his mind. He has to speak the truth of music.
Right. The guy says, "You're not the only composer in Vienna." No, but I'm the best. One thing I read, one person's opinion, I don't remember if it was on Letterboxd or where, but he said that he didn't like this movie as much as he might have because he thought Mozart had a dumb face. He thought Hulse had an unintelligent face, and that didn't suit Mozart. That is crazy and, impish and crass as Mozart is supposed to be. He's never supposed to, like, no, nothing in the record says Mozart ever looked dumb. And that was this person's take. I'm not saying that's my take necessarily, but I guess Tom Hulse does occasionally make some goofy faces.
I mean, that is decidedly not my take. I think that makes it so much better that he just has this doofy frat boy look the whole time. Even as he's sick and dying, he gets those dumb expressions on his face.
In this application process is another moment when I think they convey the genius of Mozart so well, which is that his wife brings sheet music that he's made to Salieri, and Salieri sees it, and she says, "I got to take these back home because they're originals. Mozart doesn't make copies." But the sheet music also doesn't have any notes. I mean, it's got music notes, but it has no drafting on it.
Right.
No evidence of
Yeah.
revision. This is a writer who never revises, and it's perfect the first time. And the editing of it and the sound design is amazing because you're getting what's going through Salieri's head as he's looking at this perfect music. And like he can sight read. He can hear the music in his head as he's reading it and like grappling with this came out without effort, basically. This just flows from Mozart, at least as far as Salieri is concerned.
And F. Murray Abraham, his readings of these monologues, this narration is just so good, and it's so evocative when he's describing like how great this music is. And Brian, I sent you a parody from How I Met Your Mother when Marshall's talking about a hamburger with the same kind of voice. It's incredible stuff.
And now I think is when I want to talk about the differences between the theatrical and the extended edition, Dan.
Okay.
It's two like threads, but it's the same deal, which is that the extended edition delves into Salieri's sexual frustration in ways that are not in, I mean, they're at the periphery of the theatrical cut, but it's a big deal in the extended.
Mm-hmm. The main scene I remember as like really sticking out is when Mozart is struggling financially, and the whole current of this is that it's his wife, Constance, I forget how you say it, something like that.
Yeah, Constanza.
Oh, like George.
Mm-hmm. Can't stand you.
And she is kind of the one like managing the household and like keeping his life on track. Although the reason that he married her is like it just happened to be the person that he was hooking up with when he met the king. And the woman's mother, who was Mozart's landlord at the time, said, "And he's engaged to my daughter." And Mozart's like, "Oh, yeah." And then from then on, they're engaged and then they get married. But she's like trying to keep Mozart's life on the rails, managing his finances, completing his day-to-day tasks so that like he could actually get paid and support a household because he also has a son. And so she's like an extremely, I was actually really noticing this time around just how important she is to the story, even in the theatrical cut. But then in the director's cut, the scene that I really remember is that when times are hard, basically she goes to Salieri and like offers herself sexually to him.
Okay, let me contextualize this because it's the whole thrust of the extended edition, which is that early on, Salieri, yes, has made this vow to God that he's going to be celibate, which is self-imposed. He just decided that himself. But like in exchange for the divine blessing, that's what he thinks he has to do. But he still has these connections at court. He's still a popular guy. and he's a music teacher, and he has this female soprano singer who's kind of his protege. And like, he doesn't try anything with her physically, but in his mind, he's got a thing going with this woman. And then the next thing is he finds out that she's the star of Mozart's opera. Mozart poached her, took her out from under Salieri, made her his ingenue. So Salieri's pissed about that, and then pretty soon finds out that Mozart is having sex with that woman. And so that really sticks in Salieri's craw. He's irked. So then what does Salieri do in retribution, in revenge? He concocts this scheme of, oh, Mozart has to be humbled. He's got to submit his stuff. They actually use the word stuff in this movie, which strikes me as too modern. You got to send in your stuff. So the wife shows up and she's got the sheet music, the divinely inspired sheet music, and you get that scene in both versions. But in the extended edition, Salieri says, hey, just so you know, I can get Mozart this job, but you got to have sex with me. You know, he uses more florid language than that, but you got to give tit for tat, basically. She is disgusted. You know, this is a gross, predatory thing to do. But at the same time, she's like, well, it's just sex. And so she shows up that night and she strips down. And my read of this, and maybe this is my own hang-ups talking, but to Salieri, sex is this impossibly huge, monumental thing. Like, it is just impossibly heavy and potent. And so, you know, he can't move past the idea of sex, whereas to her, it's a common thing. It's like, okay, this is gross, but if it's the cost of getting the position, fine. Like, it's to help out my husband. But this kind of like shatters Salieri. Like, Salieri he's messed up. And so he shoos her away. He like rings his little bell and exposes that she's got her breasts out to the servants. And so she goes away in a huff and bears no goodwill towards Salieri from this point on.
Right. And I think that really pays dividends in the final scene. Final scene plays very different without that. It's almost like, because this definitely reframes it. And I don't disagree with your reading. I think there's also just an element of like Salieri humiliating Mozart and the people close to him, and like the woman that cherishes him, and like degrading this thing that Mozart has built as part of his life, and like also emphasizing the collateral damage to his obsession. Like it even though he's going after Mozart and this obsession with music, it ends up like being really degrading to this other person too, who's like a pawn in it. And we get another example of that is the way that we ostensibly see what Mozart is doing behind closed doors at his home is that Salieri hires a young woman to be his housekeeper and essentially spy on him. So that's our eyes into the house. Although, just as an aside, I was wondering, she like has a freak out at one point. I was like, did Mozart hook up with her too, or is that what we're supposed to take away?
Oh, I wonder. I don't know.
Anyways, so she's like another collateral damage because she has like this breakdown of like, I can't do this job anymore. It's breaking me being with this weirdo Mozart. And he says the scary things and he's always drunk.
Yeah. So some of these things are on Mozart himself. Like he's constantly drinking. And I love the set design of his filthy apartment and just the like half glasses of wine all over the fancy harpsichords and everything. It's like just thinking about all the stuff they had to put together to make this movie, and then Tom Hulce is shambling through with the like dirty wig. Like this would have been a fun shoot.
Yeah.
Dan, quick question. Do you consider this a biopic?
Funny you should mention that. I opened my review I wrote in 2022 by saying I don't really like musical biopics, and yet Amadeus, which is a biographical picture about a musician, is one of my favorite movies. That suggests either it's not really your standard musical biopic, or else it's doing things that musical biopics try to do, but better. And I would say both of those are true. I think it is different. It's more literary and plays looser with the truth in a way that enhances the story, but it still is kind of doing musical biopic things where it's, hey, here's a musician and you're going to get to hear some of his greatest hits. And what was the context for some of these things being made? And how did the art mirror the life that he went through and
Right.
stuff?
It'll do the thing where something happens in his personal life and you get the cut to Mozart's eyes lighting up and then the cut to the stage of, oh, he's doing the famous song.
Right, but it just works really well here. Like there's some that always make me laugh and some that give me chills. Like when his dad dies and it cuts to this figure who we learn, or at least it's suggested in one of his operas, is like a ghostly stand-in for the shadow that his dad had over him. Or the one that makes me laugh is when the landlord, Constanza's mom, is harping on him about, you got to take better care of your wife. And then he imagines the famous, I think that's Magic Flute. It's one of them. Anyways, maybe it's Figaro. I can't remember. But anyways, it cuts to that, and we get it like superimposed over her talking. I find that one very funny. But what about you, Brian? Is it a musical biopic?
I think it meets the definition.
Yeah,
It is over and above. It sets itself apart, but I think we got to grapple with that it is one.
right. But it's based on a play, which is like an overt dramatization. Like not too many musical biopics are based off of plays, and I think that lends it more heft than something that's really just like taking a life story. Or sometimes it'll be like based off a specific book or something. This one works has something else there, I think. So
One of the things that Salieri does to smear Mozart is the king comes to him and says, "Hey, I'm looking for a music teacher for my 13-year-old niece." And Salieri says, "Oh, well, that Mozart, he can't be trusted around minor girls," which is a kind of a ironically funny thing to tell King Jeffrey Jones.
okay.
But yeah, no, it's not a good look for Mozart. It's character assassination, false accusations.
Right. Although it's like founded in the fact that we know that Mozart has canoodled with women that he has trained, but I don't think there's anything to say that it's been minors.
Right. Also interesting, I think that all these highfalutin composers, these brilliant artists, they what they need is, and his dad says, composition doesn't pay. You need pupils. It's like their bread and butter is like teaching kids piano, basically.
And there's some hidden irony in that because obviously, like, we don't care which noble Mozart taught, that's not interesting. But the music that he wrote is interesting, like 200 some years later.
Yeah. And I mean, I was thinking about 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T. Think about that movie a lot. But in that, you've got the piano teacher who thinks highly of himself, but it's like he's a door-to-door salesman.
Mm-hmm.
And then what are you teaching the kids to do? You're teaching them to join this pipeline of starving musicians
Right.
in the name of that we think highly of art, but it may not be the most remunerative path.
Sure. Although if it's like a noble, it probably doesn't matter whether you're interested in gardening or piano. You're probably going to be doing all right.
Mm-hmm. There's some big recreations of the operas that everybody's making. Mozart's especially, but we also see a Salieri opera staged in these lavish productions.
And it really seems like they trained and put on the operas, if not the full operas, then like scenes in elaborate production detail according to something I wrote in my review, which I think is based on research I did when I wrote the review, real opera houses that are either the ones that they would have been performed at
hundreds of years ago, or like dressed in a way as if it were the way they would have actually been produced.
Right. So it's like you're actually there, because in some ways you are.
And there's so much that's formally great about this movie, but one thing that I love is the repeated shot of whoever's conducting, and it's like the world is in front of them and we're looking at them to their face, and it's like they're trying to force the world into their vision of the world or something like that, like the way that they're kind of controlling the things going on around them as they conduct. It's just a very effective shot, of course supplemented by everything happening around it.
So what are the big features? First, it's the marriage of Figaro.
I think that's the serious-ish one they talk about. He designs this really elaborate, like 20-minute six-part harmony or something like that. But the king yawns one time, and so Salieri has this like deranged monologue about number of yawns translating to how long it is that your opera will be canceled, and one is the optimum amount for maximum heartbreak.
Right. And so Salieri sees the brilliance of the work, but is also relishing that the contemporaries don't get it. The nobles, the tastemakers aren't into what Mozart's putting out there. But it's both. Salieri loves it and he hates it, that this is the reception that Mozart is getting, because he feels duty bound to scheme against Mozart, but also Salieri feels over and above these dullards, and it's very complicated what Salieri is. It reminds me of, did you ever read that book, A Separate Piece?
A long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah, where, okay, so in A Separate Piece, this is my interpretation of it. I read it in like eighth grade, and I forget what the teacher said it was about, but it takes place at this boys' boarding school, and there's this protagonist boy who's narrating, and this like perfect superior boy comes and joins the school, and the narrator is like in awe of this kid, and he starts to hate this kid, and I really strongly got the vibe that he was gay for this kid.
Right.
And then it ends with him pushing the kid out of a tree, and he was like a star athlete, but he gets like riggedy wrecked by falling out of this tree. And then like, it's like Fight Club, destroy something beautiful.
Right. I did you see that movie, the one that Emerald Fennell did before Wuthering Heights? It's a single word. It's the name of the estate in the movie. What's it called?
I know I did not see it, but I'm curious.
Saltburn. Saltburn. So Saltburn is basically a sensationalized and somewhat modified riff on A Separate Piece, where there's one boy who's kind of the main character who kind of latches on to a much cooler and in every way better, and that is a kid, and that is connected to both like lust and scheming as a substitute for lust, or at least accompaniment to lust. I thought that movie was a ton of fun. It got really bad reviews, but I really liked it.
I'd watch it. I like the vibe of the one Emerald Fennell movie that I've seen so far, which was that Wuthering Heights. But I also think of a song by Weird Al Yankovic that's called Headline News, and it's news stories ripped from the headlines of, like, I think the 80s, like real stories that he tells the tale in this song, recaps these like salacious news events that went viral. One of the verses is about Nancy Kerrigan and Tanya Harding. He says, once there was this girl who swore that one day she would be a figure skating champion, and when she finally made it, she saw some other girl who was better, and so she hired some guy to whack her on the kneecaps. And that too, in its way, is a capsule review of Amadeus.
Oh man, I had never made the Amadeus Tanya Harding connection.
Margot Robbie in both Wuthering Heights and I, Tanya.
Oh, there you go. I haven't seen I, Tanya.
It was okay. It was a biopic.
I have a Amadeus question, not related to Margot Robbie. In fact, opposite of Margot Robbie.
What is the opposite of Margot Robbie?
Well, Margot Robbie is a beautiful woman. There's this one actor who's like a fat guy who always is hanging around with the king. And this guy looks like he actually came from the 1700s. I love this guy. This guy's great.
I know the guy that you're talking about. I get the titles mixed up. He might be the Kapellmeister, but he's there to get reaction shots. It's like they'll cut to him looking bloated and befuddled.
And baffled. It's like, what is going on? Yeah.
He's the guy who says, German is too brutal for singing. And after Marriage of Figaro, it's Don Giovanni, I think. The one where the guy comes out and it's like the embodiment of the dead father, and he's got this almost like Darth Vader-y black bodysuit. He smashes through a brick wall. So, Dan, what is your take on opera? Do you indulge in opera? Do you follow opera?
So that's a good question. And here's my answer. I intellectually appreciate what opera is, but one of the things I learned about opera in so I mentioned the history of classical music course. I also did a history of opera course. And when I said I mean, I listened to like it's a podcast, but I learned a ton and it felt like I was like in a great class of the guy lecturing. One of the points that he makes about opera is that to be an opera fan who gets the most out of opera, it's best as like a homework appreciation type of art. Like the things that make opera most interesting, some of it you can just appreciate as like, oh, they wrote a good tune, you know? And oh, it's kind of an interesting story where dramatic things happen. But what really makes the best operas so interesting are like the kind of things that you need to really have a specific ear for or like to be prepared for and listen to. So like opera was where the concept of leitmotif was invented. Like musical ideas that tie to either themes or characters or settings or actions. And the most interesting operas, those get like expanded and intermixed with other characters or like changed from major key to minor key. And like certain things will happen on certain words. And it's like, oh, this dropped down when he said this character's name. That's foreshadowing that character is going to die in the next act. And stuff that's like all impressive and like would be very gratifying to understand and see unfold. But I have never taken the time to really do that. And so my appreciation of opera is much more surface level. Like, I think it's impressive that they sing the way they do. It's like kind of mind blowing that they sing that way. They have to train for years and years even to get out a note that like has that resonance and that vibrato. And then also just appreciation that there are like some tunes that like, oh, like I don't need to know anything about opera to appreciate that. Like, I think it's Strauss. One of them wrote like a drinking song. And it's like, this sounds like a great drinking song. You just play the drinking song. And it's in an opera where characters are drinking and singing together, and it's terrific. You don't need to know any of that other stuff. So I don't really have any resentment towards opera. And one running joke in my family is that I get really excited every Saturday when we turn on the radio because we always have it tuned to 90.9, which is our local classical station. And I'll be like, yeah, it's Opera Saturday, because they always play operas on Saturdays on 90.9. And I'm like, the best day of the year is Opera Saturday, and I get 52 of them every year. And then my 8-year-old's like, Dad, can we listen to something else? Although I got her good recently when she said, can we listen to music with words? When we got in the car on a Saturday, and I said, uh-oh, you're in a world of pain now. And I went and I turned on opera, and I wouldn't change it even when she asked me to change it. Like, you told me to put on music with words, and this is what we're listening to.
Yeah, I'm on pretty much the same page, I guess. I probably know less about opera than you do, having taken that specialized course. I think it's really funny that you said you have no resentment towards opera. Well, I guess I have no resentment towards opera either. But so I really like musicals, but I can understand the language that they're singing in when I go and see a like a more contemporary musical. Often opera it is in a variety of languages, as discussed in this film, but because it's often in a language that I don't speak, it puts it at a distance from me. So I can appreciate the spectacle, the costumes, the sets, everything that had to be made, and yes, the power of the vocals and how intricate the melodies are. But I often don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, well, what is this?
Well, you need to have like a translation in front of you and like a scene map so you can follow what's going on.
Right. I have seen some. I have seen some with subtitles on the screen. Like they used to show some on PBS, and they'd have a runner saying what it is.
But this does bring me to something that was one of the tenets of Robert Greenberg's Intro to Opera. Is what we may have talked about this on air before, but what's the difference between an opera and a musical? And do you know the answer?
I think we did discuss, and you had the punchline. So what's the answer?
The pithy answer that Robert Greenberg has is that the difference between a musical and an opera is that an opera is performed at an opera house. In other words, there is not a meaningful semantical difference. Things that people call operas tend to share certain characteristics, but they're not really like functionally different from like a Broadway musical. It's like the same ideas of a Broadway musical, but like a Broadway musical might be, I mean, yes, language is one thing, singing style is one thing, but like there are operas that don't have that specific singing style, and there are operas in English, and there are operas with like simpler songs and less motivic work and all that stuff. And similarly, there are what we would call just musicals that have some of those things, that have more operatic elements and stuff. So we kind of like know it when we hear it, opera versus not opera, but and things tend to get categorized as opera or not opera, but like truly there's not a semantical definition of what an opera is relative to other sung narrative music. And
Right.
stories.
Yeah, and there have been trends and evolutions. So, like Gilbert and Sullivan with operettas, light operas, kind of a transitional missing link thing.
Mm-hmm.
And actually reading about, I think Andrew Lloyd Webber, I don't know, somewhere along the way when we were doing Musical Month, I was reading about the history of musical theater and when did things start to be called musicals. And there was a whole dedicated article about an era in German theater called the Singspiel, which just means a play with songs. But yeah, I'll link to that too. I don't remember what it said, but I like the name.
I'm sure that was covered in that course I did, but I don't remember specifically what they said about singspiels and that.
But I guess what I want to boil it down to here in Mozart is they're really selling that opera is this elevated, magnificent thing, and I don't know if I get there all the way. I've discussed that talking about this film on the podcast previously. It's like I get 90% of the way there. It's like what makes it work for me is that I understand that the characters are passionate, that they believe this. It's the way that people are about jazz drumming in Whiplash.
Okay. You respect that they respect it. Yeah.
I buy the obsession. Yes. It's kind of important, the discussion of the highbrow versus lowbrow, because as Mozart is putting out these operas, they're not making the financial splash that he needs them to. It's like he's putting a whole bunch of work into making them and staging them, and then they don't get long runs, both because of Salieri's scheming and just that the elite don't seem to be into it. The king, who's ultimately the big influencer, is not really on board. He is bored. And so they're not taking off and making money, these shows.
Well, think about like what I just said about what Robert Greenberg said that a like the way to get the most out of an opera is to really have a sophisticated understanding of both the music and the writing. And someone who's like just a king who's just a guy, goes to banquets. When I say just a guy, I mean obviously the king has tremendous power, but like is not necessarily a musical genius the
Right.
way.
He's just somebody who was born into his role.
Right. And he's not even like a musical mind as opposed to genius. Like he's not like even at the Salieri level. So he and hasn't devoted his life to understanding and appreciating the intricacies of it the way that Salieri has. It kind of makes sense that they wouldn't approve of it. And I do find it interesting. I was thinking about this when I watched exactly what you just said, which is that like in retrospect and in the way that the movie depicts it, like these highbrow, lowbrow schemas seem like artificially imposed. Like it's kind of just all music. It is kind of interesting how much of it is like dominated by the social perspective and also like what brings the money. And like that's what a lot of it boils down to is like what is he going to get paid to do?
Yes. So the third act of this movie is this wan, sickly Mozart taking on two projects at the same time with the hopes that something's going to pay because he's in dire straits. And the two projects, one is he's got this friend who's an actor, and this actor performs in the Commoners Theater, the like street theater. Although this is, as I mentioned, it's like I don't see that much of a distinction. And yeah, maybe that's the point. But they talk about it that he's this lowest common denominator entertainer. And the wife almost looks down on him. This was a real dude. His name is Emmanuel Schikaneder.
Quite a name.
He pitches to Mozart, "Hey, your stuff is not taken off in the elite theater, the royal theater. You should come here for perform to the groundlings and they'll love your stuff." And Mozart is kind of won over by it. He's like, "Okay, you're a cool party dude. I'm a cool party dude. Let's do it." And his wife is kind of trying to keep him on the track of like, this is a poor guy. You're a phrase that I heard recently was living a champagne life on a beer budget. And that's what Mozart's doing. He's living beyond his means. He needs some coin of the realm. And the other project that comes his way is Salieri disguises himself and shows up on Mozart's doorstep one night and says, "I will give you money to compose a requiem." So he's commissioning this. Salieri is paying money and he's in disguise. So Mozart's wife is on board with this. She's like, "Hey, wait a minute, money. He's paying up
Yeah.
front. You should work on this, Mozart."
There's so many layers to all of this because one thing is that he's as a disguise, but the way that Salieri has dressed himself up is in the same costume that the character who represented the dad in a previous opera we saw depicted showed up. And we knew that Mozart had a fraught relationship with his dad. It seemed like he wanted to mend it, but then his dad died. So like having the essentially the ghost of his dad come and say, "Write a requiem mass and I will pay you right now, and then I will vanish." He's kind of writing it for his dad, but also like the shadow of everything that his dad brought into his life. So it's kind of a requiem for his own creative career. And yes, he's also very sick. So there's that going on too.
Yeah.
But then there's also just like that's a very deranged thing. Like someone to come, it's like a twisted thing. Someone comes and says, "Write a death mask and I'm dressed like a ghost and you're not going to know who I am." And that's kind of weird. But then like what the guy who's the actor proposes, like what feels more like how art should work is like, you make a thing and if you make it good and people like it, we're going to pay you half of all the money that comes in. So just write a good thing that people like and they want to hear, and then we'll pay you. And everybody's looking down on this. I was like, wait, this sounds like the artistic model. Like this is what I'm kind of on board with this. And I think the movie is kind of playing with that irony that like the thing that is supposedly paying the bills now is this weird, messed up dynamic. And then this other thing that has the potential to be very lucrative and is like being poo-pooed.
Yes. I agree with all of that. So time is going on. Mozart's working on both of these things. Everything is building. Everything is kind of manic and stressful because Salieri's plan, which is pretty convoluted, I think it's got too many steps. But his idea is that he's going to, with this Requiem project, work Mozart to death and then claim the Requiem as his own work. So Salieri's going to get the byline and perform this Requiem at Mozart's funeral so that he can piggyback on the Mozart legacy and cement his association with Mozart forevermore.
Right. It's going to be in his name is the important thing.
So a lot of things have to go just so for that to go the way that Salieri wants. Like, I mean, think of all the ways it could fall through. What if Mozart just doesn't die?
At the exact time, that would be very convenient. Or like, what if Mozart says, "Hey, I'm writing this cool requiem" to someone?
Yeah, anyone. Or writes his name on it. Or, yeah.
Right? Or like, hey, this is a thing that was in Mozart's house in the place where he composes stuff. I wonder who wrote this. I bet Salieri did.
But it builds to a good payoff. So the Magic Flute is also coming along. It actually does well. Mozart, though, collapses at one of the performances, and Salieri is there to like spirit him away back to his house. Schikaneder shows up with the box office receipts, and they're good. And it's okay. Well, here is some money that has come through, but Salieri manages to intercept it. He's like, "Oh, I'll give it to him," and has the bag of coins, and then turns around, goes to Mozart, and says, "Hey, Mozart, finish the Requiem tonight, and I'll give you this." So basically, it's already Mozart's money, and Salieri is playing this trick to really work him through the night. But it leads to this great climax where they work together. So Mozart is bedbound, and he's dictating, and Salieri is transcribing. So talk about this scene a little bit.
This is like just an all-time great scene. So what they are composing is, yes, this Requiem Mass, and there's a specific piece in the Requiem Mass called the Lacrimosa. I think it's a standard in Requiem Masses, but it's like this very mournful, deathly, nightmarish tune. Mozart, who is just in rough shape right now, he's like all sweaty. He's got all the makeup on. This and then Old Man Salieri are where they won that Oscar. And his like eyes are yellow, and like we see the last gasps of genius coming through him. He's seen as if like the pearly gates in front of him, the vision of what this masterpiece will be. But for the first time, Salieri is a part of this beautiful act of creation. Mozart describes it as he sees it, the way the notes fit together, the way pieces rise and fall, and just F. Murray Abraham doing some great face acting, like, "Oh, yes," and jotting the notes down as Mozart's describing it. It's all building towards this grand finale. I mean, writing this most deathly and astonishing piece that, of course, is going to get played over the finale of the movie. And just seeing Mozart in rougher and rougher shape, and Salieri more and more invigorated by the powerful creation. And we can essentially, like, we get the sense of like all these things colliding and happening at once. So like Salieri is like finally almost like merging with Mozart. They're like consummating their artistic frenemies relationship here. And the writing of it is like sucking the life out of Mozart.
Yeah, it's like channeling the spirit. It's flowing from one into the other. And the sound editing is so good. Just the way that, you can hear the music, but it's in their heads as well. I guess they're like humming too. Like, Mozart's giving it to him bit by bit. And Salieri is transcribing as fast as he can. You go too fast. You go too fast. So Amadeus got 11 Oscar nominations, including 2 for Best Actor. So both Mozart and Salieri nominated for Best Actor. It ended up winning 8 Oscars. So it got Best Picture, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Art Direction, Best Costume Design, Best Makeup, Best Sound, and Best Actor for F. Murray Abraham. Salieri won.
Yeah, justice for Salieri. Now, a couple things on this. One is in 2026, they've gotten so much better about like, or I say better in quotes. I don't think it's better for the art form, but it's better in terms of like cutthroat competitive tactics.
Yeah, basically, they never do this anymore. Of two people from the same movie up for lead actor.
Yeah, managing like how they campaign for these actors. I don't know who they would have selected as the lead if they did this. I feel like F. Murray Abraham is more central to the story.
Right, he's really the protagonist.
But like Mozart it's Amadeus, you know? It's like it's about Mozart.
Right.
So I actually don't know what they would have done in 2026. Who they would have pushed for what. Did you see the third Knives Out movie?
No.
Okay, so it centers around this priest played by that O'Connor. I think it's Josh O'Connor, the actor. He gets like tons of screen time. He gets like the first half hour entirely to himself. The entire story is around this priest character. But at time for the award season, he campaigned as supporting, which I would not have guessed. But the reason he did was so that Daniel Craig could be lead. So like even in these cases where you really have 2 people who could be lead, they just don't do it anymore.
Yeah.
So I always thought this was awesome that they did this.
Yeah, the one that I was thinking of was Wicked. Didn't you say there was recently Ariana Grande for supporting?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah. In both of them, she campaigned as supporting.
But Mozart doesn't make it. So it gets to the wee hours of the morning, and the wife comes back. Constanza had been estranged briefly. She'd been in some other city. I don't remember where she's at, but not in Vienna. She decides she needs to be back in Vienna, be by his side. And who does she find in his apartment in the middle of the night but Salieri, who, if we saw the extended edition, we know why she hates, but even in the theatrical, we know she doesn't like this guy because he's where he doesn't belong. I mean, clearly Mozart is sick and brought and put upon.
I was thinking a little bit about how we read her disdain for Salieri when we don't have the scene where he sexually humiliates her. And I think it's a couple of things. It's like, yeah, you shouldn't be here. This isn't where a guy like you should be. It's almost like he's the angel of death in here. It's like he's bringing in some evil spirit, and you kind of have to read it that way.
Yeah. I mean, you just think of any weird guy who you only kind of know is suddenly in your bedroom when you didn't expect that.
Right. You wouldn't be on board. Right.
I mean, even just one time my dad shaved his mustache, and I'd never seen him without a mustache my whole life. And I was like 20, and I came around a corner, and he was standing in the kitchen, and I just about screamed. It felt like some stranger off the street was standing in the kitchen.
R.I.P. mustache.
That's my anecdote. He has a mustache again. But Constanza shoos Salieri away. He's like, but the Requiem, it's not finished. And she says, and it never will be. I'm forbidding Wolfie to work on this thing. And she locks it away in this little cabinet. It ends up not mattering because they turn around and he's already dead, so.
Yeah, and the son is there. He walks over, he's like, Daddy! And then it like cuts over to his pale face with like the dead open eyes. And it's like the freakiest thing you've ever seen, especially with the little kid tugging at his arm.
Next thing is the penniless Mozart, who's only 35, gets buried in a pauper's grave. The casket that they carry him in that has a dropout bottom so that they could just sluice the next guy through. The next poor stiff. is so good. And they carry him through the snow and just pile him in this pile of old, poor bodies.
Yeah.
Give him the scoop of lie.
There's a lot of good verbiage right there, Brian.
Yeah, oh, I've thought about this scene a lot, and yeah, it really works because, okay, Salieri's plan has succeeded. Mozart is dead. He's ruined this beautiful thing, and for what? Now it's just a pile of trash,
Right.
and Salieri doesn't get any of the glory because the thing is locked in the cabinet, and he's not going to get his hands on it again.
And it kind of ties in with themes of like how is the way that we create music tied with our relationship with God, and of course like the notion of an afterlife. And then you get this most degrading way to treat your dead body, and like nobody's there for the funeral, nobody cares, except we know that even like a couple decades later Mozart is a household name, and there's even the implication that it's like literally turning a corner the day that he dies because he makes this opera that a whole bunch of people go see. So maybe that's like the thing that gets the ball rolling for Mozart to be a famous composer in a way that he never was during his lifetime. And so it's like just again covered in this layers and this irony. It's very evocative, and of course, just at a big scale, like on when you zoom out, it's like this person who we all recognize as one of the great musical geniuses of the past millennium is here, just as you said, being sluiced into the ground with a whole bunch of other bodies, and no one but a priest doing a sign of the cross and then walking away.
So, Dan, you said you read a little bit about Mozart's death. Did he really go in a pauper's grave like that?
Yes. What they don't agree on is what he died from. Also, there's debate over the nature of his sickness, not just like what did he die from, but was it like a chronic thing that gradually got worse, which is kind of what it looks like here, or was it a sudden onset illness? Because he sometimes talked about like not feeling well, but then there were reports that like in the couple months before he died, he was actually doing better. And he had always fought like minor to moderate health issues his whole life. So, or was it something like he did have a chronic thing and maybe he did get a little bit better, but there was a sudden onset in the last couple weeks or something? The reason people wonder that is because they wonder how much that influenced the way that he wrote some of his last and greatest pieces, like even including this Requiem, for example. Was it like he was at a state where he knew that his body was going, and so he truly was writing it as if it was his own Requiem? Or was it like, oh, he was just doing another job and then he happened to die when he was writing a song about death, and it's just kind of a coincidence? But it's not. It's also other stuff that he was writing around the time, like the opera that we were just talking about. What's it called again?
Magic Flute?
Yeah, Magic Flute.
Die Zauberflöte?
Yeah. And it turns out like the thought that he was murdered by another jealous musician has basically always been like a rumor around his death. There was a rumor, but it is like controversial that he did actually in his final days dictate part of the Requiem Mass, because parts of it are not written in his handwriting, but it's not Salieri. It was actually one of his students, one of the people that he was teaching who was doing that. So there's a lot of debate about that. And I actually just read recently that there is a theory that the Lacrimosa was not finished by Mozart in his lifetime, but that somebody, perhaps it was a student, wrote the rest of it, so finished it so that it could be complete. It's kind of like if you ever watch The Magnificent Ambersons, because they sliced and diced it and got rid of some of Orson Welles' footage and put in some of their own footage. But if you watch it, you can see like, oh, this is clearly an Orson Welles thing because this is like great and incredible. And then there's like a scene that's flat and poorly lit and awkward. And you're like, well, that was obviously not an Orson scene. And so some like Mozart lovers have similar like, oh, he wrote these measures of Lacrimosa, but not these measures. It's kind of interesting.
Definitely. The movie jumps back to the present of 1823, with old Salieri finishing up his Forrest Gump story. And he's basically spent the last 50 years watching his music be forgotten and the rise of Mozart. Mozart becoming the legend that Salieri always knew that he was, but now his star is eclipsing. And Salieri says he's a mediocrity. That's the word he uses several times as the movie ends. He's the patron saint of mediocrities.
Just a great movie closing monologue because they wheel him away and he's literally driving past like people in a messed up old insane asylum, like chained to a wall and in a cage and like moaning. And it reminds you that like, man, this guy actually is pretty dang crazy. Like he just said that, yes, I killed Mozart by having him write a song. And yet like with the way that we've seen it unfold, it does kind of feel that way. So it's like, is he insane or is he not insane? And it's very fascinating. And the idea of being the patron saint of mediocrity is just, it's an incredible concept and a turn of phrase. And I just like how it ties in with all of his self-image as it relates to God. It's like he still is like a servant of God, but instead of being a musician, the way that he gets to serve God is by being the most mediocre person he could possibly be.
Yeah, I think Salieri needs to touch grass. I think that's really what he needed. He needed some perspective that could only come from not constantly being alone in a chamber with a piano.
Yeah.
Like you got to go out and talk to some people, dude, and like be outside in the sunlight and get your vitamin D.
Or maybe get laid, as somebody might say.
Yeah. And that's Amadeus. Best Picture winner, 1984.
Have you seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest?
I read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I don't think I watched the whole movie.
Mm-hmm.
Great book. And what I have seen of the movie was quite good. I just don't remember if I think they put it on in class and we didn't finish it, so I need to go back.
Yeah, you should watch it. It's the same director. And I can't remember, did Cuckoo's Nest win Best Picture also?
It may have done. It definitely got a lot of buzz. I mean, people speak highly of that film. And Ratchet and McMurphy.
Like out of college, I would have told you that Cuckoo's Nest was my favorite Milos Forman film. But I've definitely turned a corner on that and am Team Amadeus now.
Yes, one of 3 films to win all 5 major Academy Awards: Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Director, and Best Screenplay.
I thought so.
The other 2 being It Happened One Night.
Yeah, which we talked about.
And Silence of the Lambs. Cool. Well, I definitely have to watch that, but the book was so good. It's like I almost feel that I don't need to watch the movie, but I would be interested. I mean, it was a really compelling story. Okay, Dan. We did it. 2 movies, episode 250. We've covered some 400 things that we've given ratings to.
Incredible.
5+ years. It's been a journey. What mountains remain to be climbed, Dan? What opuses lie ahead?
It's a great question. And I think it's a haze. We know that there's a path forward, but we don't know what it is. And perhaps that's something that we can reflect upon in an upcoming spectacular and maybe another special exercise that could be part of that episode or could be a separate thing. And then we will be doing a special episode with not one, but with 2 guests. This will be the return of Gavin and his father, Kevin, the McDowells. And we will be discussing, in fact, spoiler alert, we have already discussed My Cousin Vinny. And that will be our official episode 251. I think that will be a special episode to share with our listeners, Brian.
Yes, we're going to keep the good times rolling. Another big event episode, because you can't just have one. But before we go, Dan, we have business.
That's right.
Is it good?
Is it good is our signature section where we each give the movies a rating on our 8-point goodness scale, ranging from a 1 out of 8, which is very not good, to our masterpiece rating, Tortigood, which is an 8 out of 8. Brian, you picked these movies, so I go first. So I will answer, is Armageddon good? And this is a tricky one because I have a lot of unresolved and conflicting feelings about it. Some movies you're just like, well, that's good. It is what it is, and you move on. Other movies defy basic categorization. Cats, for example. And this isn't quite on the level of Cats, but it has its own set of baggage. It's like a notoriously bad movie, but I don't feel as if that's fair. I think it's like a notoriously extreme version of its style. Earlier in this episode, I called it the nacho cheese of movies, and maybe that's not a perfect metaphor, but I kind of like it because nacho cheese is what you want to be eating with your corn chips when you're sitting at a baseball stadium and you're paying $12 for something. You want nacho cheese. That's what you want. It's salty, it's fatty, but it tastes good in your mouth, and maybe you get a little bit of a stomach ache, but it tastes good in the moment, That's a little bit about how I feel about Armageddon. I honestly feel you can make a really good case for many of the numbers for Armageddon because it's just extremely corny and silly and over the top, and we didn't even talk about, it's got some weird politics in it too. Like, it's kind of odd. I guess we kind of knew about climate, but that like the heroes are big time oil drivers saving the environment. It's like there's like weird mixed things in there, and I don't know. It's a mixed experience, but I'll tell you what, it moves. It's too long, but I also like am not ever at a point where I'm like, this is dull right now. It's like it manages to be interesting for the whole time, and yet it's still too much. It's got images. There's so many movies that don't have images, but this has images. For whatever reason, I remember like a 1.5 second shot of Bruce Willis talking, and it's like this slightly canted angle to make him look like a statue. And in the background, there's like a blurry American flag, but still distinctly an American flag. And Michael Bay designed that shot. He got it. And yes, Bruce Willis looks like a statue and is standing for patriotic, good old-fashioned American values. And that's an image, and there are a lot of directors out there that won't even make an image like that in their lifetime. And he did it in a 1.5 second shot. Now, is that high art? No, but it's craft, and it's effective. And so I'm kind of torn. Like, intellectually, I feel like it's well below the 5 line. Like, it's maybe not good. I wouldn't say it's not good, but it's not good. And yet in my heart, I feel kind of a spark for it, like an appreciation for it, that it's actually a good movie. But then I say the words out loud, Armageddon is a good movie, and it don't feel right. It doesn't roll off the tongue. It feels like I've just said a profanity. And so I don't think I can quite give it a good. So I'm going to say that Armageddon is good-ish. And if I were to think about just from a language perspective, that feels right as well. It is a good-ish movie. It's not quite good, but it's not bad either. It's a good-ish movie. So that's Armageddon for me, Brian. What about you?
I'm going to say some profanity here, Dan. Armageddon is a good movie. It gets a solid 5 from me, 5 out of 8. I mean, I gave Postal a 5 a week or two ago, and I think this is better than the Postal movie.
That's a good point. I gave Postal a 4. Maybe I just on that merit, I need to give Armageddon a 5.
If I were doing this podcast right after I first watched Armageddon when I was 13, I would give it a solid 6. Very good. Like, there are things about this movie that really work. I like the soundtrack. Broadly, I like the production design. I think it gets worse once they get to The Rock and it's more future-y. Because up till then, as hokey as it is, they seem to have at least put some effort into making it seem like this is a thing that could happen. Like they were at least discussing plausibility, even if they eventually throw it out the window. And I really like the opening with Charlton Heston saying, asteroids hit planets. It's a thing that happens, and on a long enough time scale, the probability goes up to 1 that it will happen. Like, that's menacing. It's also disconcertingly plausible. And I mean, it's an ensemble cast, some familiar faces. couple gags that'll make you laugh, and it's memorable. I think it earned its spot as the highest grosser. It's a popcorn movie, and it inhabited that role. And I don't think it belongs in the Criterion Collection. I'm always going to think that's strange, but I like it. So pretty solid 5 good from me.
There you go. Yeah, I'll need to think about that. We can put 4 in the record books for me, but I need to reflect on that and compare that to other things I've given 4s and 5s to. Where does it land? Because I think it's a film with merit, and I also think it's a slightly obnoxious film. So that brings us to Amadeus, and I will answer, is Amadeus good? And it is indeed good. And in fact, it is very good. In fact, it is exceptionally good. In fact, it is a masterpiece in my mind. I'm going to give an 8 out of 8, a toward a good masterpiece to Amadeus. And I was thinking about why, because there's just a lot of movies that I'm like, I admire a lot of what this did, but it's very good. You know, I can't go higher than that. So why is this one different? And it's a couple things. I mean, first of all, it's not just like well made, it's a tremendous production. Everything about the production is incredible. I love the editing. I love the sound. Of course, just like scoring your movie to Mozart's like 10 of his greatest compositions. You're talking about like just all-time masterpieces. And they do so much in elevating the mood. And they get brought in at the right time, and it's just so effective. But all the things we talked about this rich thematic heart of the film that just changes the more that you look at it and the more you think about it. And there's just a lot there, a lot to unpack, and yet not in a way that makes it difficult to sit through in any way. It's like a fun movie to watch. And so I give it a praise that there are not too many movies in this world where I would give this praise, which is that like every scene, when the scene comes on, I'm like, oh yeah, this is that good scene. I want to watch this good scene. And then you get to the next scene. It's like, oh yeah, this is a good scene. Let's watch this scene. There are a few movies like that out there, and Amadeus is that way. I was like, oh yeah, this part. Let's watch this part. This is a good part. And I get excited about that. It's just a very pleasurable movie in the way that it like makes the lives of these two musicians terrible in very different but like double helix intertwined sort of ways. I think it's tremendously written, tremendously made, tremendously directed, tremendously acted. It's just what you want a best picture to be. It's a masterpiece, Brian. What about you?
I can't give it anything other than a masterpiece. Got to be an 8. It's in my top 20 favorite movies. Maybe it deserves to be even a little higher than that. This is a movie where I feel the feelings. I buy that these people's choices have led them to this place. Salieri, in particular, one of my favorite movie characters. He deserved the Best Actor Oscar. I mean, his performance sells it. Sells the obsession, sells the madness, sells the wounded delusions of grandeur that Salieri has. Like, this is a messed up dude. But everything in this movie is so fully realized. They went to the real places and they did the dang thing. They've got the costumes, they've got the music. They have so many like plots and subplots in the story. Like, all the characters have things going on, but it's these two leads at the heart of it. Kind of interesting that both Armageddon and Amadeus are 2.5 hours long. Amadeus earns it a little more, and the extended edition is 3 hours, which I think is still workable runtime because the stuff that is in there is compelling, I think. Do you have a verdict, Dan, of theatrical versus extended? Like, what do you seek out? Is there one that you think is superior?
I am not resolved in my opinion on that. I did like that it was a little bit fleeter at 2.5 hours. I remember there feeling like a little more drag when I watched the director's cut, but they weren't quite as different as I was expecting them to be. I do feel like it really changes the tenor of the film to have the stuff from the director's cut with Constanza or whatever her name is, the wife, and Salieri. It just makes it a little bit of a more darker and makes Salieri just a little bit more sinister and messed up. It adds even more tendrils into the thematic stew. and makes that moment when she sees Salieri in the room at the very end have more punch. So I would need to see the director's cut again to kind of lock in on an opinion on that matter, I think.
Yeah, I think the longer version offers a key that kind of better unlocks everything that's going on. But the theatrical cut, it's been a while since I watched it, but I remember that worked too. I'd never felt that something was missing when I watched it. But I do think the longer version adds some important things. So, 8 to both, I guess. I'll usually watch the longer one.
Yeah, in this case, I'm not making a distinction in my rating across the two. I didn't feel all of the things that I would say about them. You could pretty much say about both of them. So the theatrical and the director's cut. So I'm with you on that.
Okay. Well, here we are, Dan. 250 episodes down. The future ahead. It's been a journey. It's been an expedition.
We did it.
And the end is not yet.
Cool. Well, we will have time to reflect upon that. Listeners, we wouldn't be here if not for you. So thank you for listening to this Titanic episode. Not about Titanic, but in size. This monumental episode. And thank you for going through a quarter K episodes with us. And we'll see you next time.
Join us next week, because you don't want to miss a thing.